3, 2, 1.
This is the beginning of the end for you.
To the sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun.
A mighty sword!
Strike while the iron's hot.
For Camelot! For Avalon!
Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the SMITE Pro League Season 9, powered by Prime Gaming. And we are in week 4 here of phase number 1. And it's the last week of this portion of the phase. The next week, there's a seeding land. If you were watching Waiting Room, a couple weeks later, there's going to end up being this whole Masters tournament that's 2 weeks, 16 teams, a whole ton that is going to be going on. But we got to make it through this week first. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you immediately to Prime Gaming for being the sponsor here for Season 9, but also to remind you guys out there what exactly you can get. So if you're not a Prime member and you don't know anything about this, this is going to be something that is all access with the most powerful membership service in the world. And if you're wondering, well, what does that include? Well, you're going to be able to get free delivery, you're going to get music, movies, all of that normally comes with like an Amazon Prime subscription, right? All of the stuff that you're going to get from that. But on top of that, you get exclusive content, free games, one free monthly Twitch sub to any streamer you want. You can use it here. You can use it on anybody else. Or like Mifflin. And you get seasonal discounts and other surprise perks throughout it. There are things, if you're watching, streams every now and then, there's going to be drops that show up for certain games, and you can get that when you have Prime. If you're already a Prime Gaming subscriber, then just make sure that you make the most of your Prime membership with the free games, the extras, and everything else that comes with it. So remember that, if you're already subscribed, that you're going to get so many of those benefits, and you need to take advantage of them. There's a little box up on the top right of your Twitch screen, and that has a huge drop down. You go through there, you're going to have.
Bottom right now.
Is it on the bottom right? No, I've seen it on the top right. I can open it on my laptop right here.
Okay, I'll
in front of
check.
me.
You keep doing your
Either
thing.
way, you're going to be able to find free games. Again, a lot of in-game exclusive content, a ton of stuff that you get with that. Plus, again, that free monthly sub that you're going to be able to throw to any of your favorite creators. So again, thank you to Prime Gaming for sponsoring Season 9 of the SPL, and thanks to you Primers out there for being out there. It's on the bottom right. There's no way. When did they move it? Did they move it like within the last 20 minutes? I was on Twitch prior to this.
Mine's on the bottom right, man.
Twitch.tv/SmiteGame. Game. That's where we're at.
That's where you're currently watching.
And
or YouTube.
Up in the top right, there's a little crown, Prime Gaming Loot.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the subscribe button.
No,
Any
the
primers in
subscribe.
chat?
Oh yeah, no, the subscribe button is down in the bottom right. But if
Any
and
primers?
you know what? Hey, if you're a primer in chat, I've got chat open now. I've done something that I always get told not to do.
Hindu's not in today.
And
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Hindu Man as well. If you do subscribe, I'll throw your names out there. But it's up in the that way. Either way, nope, that way. Mirrored. Either way, we can look at the schedule and the standings. This has been an eclectic start. Me and Mifflin are going to argue it. Hey, Gore. Hey, guy. How are y'all doing? Either way, here's the schedule, and that's why we're not supposed to have it open, because I will read chat the entire time. Today, we're going to be looking at the Bolts, the Titans up first, the Scarabs, and the Warriors a little bit later, and then the match continues, or the week continues. Tomorrow, match of the week, Leviathans and the Valkyries. The Bolts and the Scarabs, so doubleheader 2 days in a row for those two. Valkyries versus Kings kick off the triple header on Sunday, Leviathans Dragons, which I think is going to be a highly contended match. And then one that's going to be very interesting to see what the Warriors have to offer for us. The Titans have not been falling too often, but will they end up falling down overall to the Warriors, or will they continue on their hot streak? We'll see then. Shoutouts to RedJ81, by the way, for the Twitch Prime sub, just because he did it. And I said I would do it, Mifflin, so I'm going to stick with the bit.
You're gonna keep chat open the whole time.
And if they subscribe with Prime and I'm on the desk, I'll do it. I'll work it in.
I think you should, man, because we're sponsored by Prime, and I'm not even supposed to be talking about Prime. That's not my thing. They told you to do it. But here's the thing, chat, about how the Elder
You
Scrolls
saw the
4
ad? You were flipping out, actually.
Dude,
You were
Oblivion's
legitimately-
on there, dude. That's one of the sickest games ever. If the all-time games tier list, #1, you got Smite, and then Oblivion's right there. Smite, then Oblivion.
And you know what, Mifflin?
You get it for free.
Well, you can get it for free with Prime Gaming. Also, Big Boy and Notorious Skeb also end up subscribing here using
What a
their Prime
name.
sub. So 10 out of 10. And now here are the standings so we can look at it again. A lot of this matters. Top 4 go into the seeding land. They're going to be playing for their seeding at Masters. Top 6 go to the second week of Masters. Bottom 2 go to the first week of Masters. They play through it. First place in that tournament gets $40,000. It's a huge chunk of a prize pool for everybody that's going to be showing up. And that seeding land is also going to end up affecting Phase 2 seeding. So this week is very much important to see how they're going to do. And Mifflin up first. We've got the Bolts and the Titans. Now, this is where things get very, very interesting. Azazel, thanks for the sub. I'm going to keep it.
Demon?
Well, I guess so. It's Azaisal. I'm
Okay,
assuming.
no, that's not the demon.
That's not the demon?
Yeah, it's a different one.
Oh, right. Well, I'm glad you knew whether or not that was. Just got a hype train going. Look at this. This works out pretty well for us. I'm enjoying the deaths so far. Titans, though, Bolts. Titans, it feels like only one team, Mifflin, has their number. The Bolts, some days they show up and they absolutely dominate, and then some days they show up and they get dominated. It is very much what we were used to last year.
It is, and well, if the Bolts want to dominate here today, they're gonna have to do it very thoroughly because the Tartarus Titans are gonna be a team that demand excellence of them. I think that the Bolts have been having a phenomenal year so far, specifically through the Soul Lane. Haddock's been having a very good time over there, been very consistent. He's been pretty vocal about the fact that he thinks he is the best soul laner in the league, and at times he's starting to look like it too. But then you got Nika out there who's just been dominating the fantasy standing, so neither here nor there. That said, the Olympus Bolts are a team that have certainly diversified their win conditions. Venenu through mid has expanded his god pool a fair bit. The dual lane has been holding their own very well in lane. Jake has been playing a little bit more subdued than I think we could have expected, especially coming off of last year when he was playing things like the Herculeses, the Tiers, and just, I don't know, diving Tier 2 towers at the 5-minute mark. Felt like nobody was quite able to rein him in. Now, he's still got that X factor. Sometimes he might just be in your Tier 2 tower, blink, knocks, dashing forward into a Shadow Lock, because for some reason the Olympus Bolts want to be the villains of the SPL. But at times, he's been able to rein that aggression in, play more so that facilitator role, and the Olympus Bolts has started to look a lot better for it. But I think you highlight one of the main facets of the Olympus Bolts that has been limiting to them, and it's their ability to find that consistency. It is one of the few teams that I think still rings true. It's the Bolts and the Oni Warriors, but there are legitimately just two versions of this team. One that dominates and one that gets dominated. The middle ground has not quite been there. We haven't just seen the Olympus Bolts on an okay day. It's either a great day or a bad one. I want to see some okay days.
And you know what? I'm sure a bunch of Bolts fans out there would like to see a lot of great days, right? Like they if they want consistency, they don't want just okay days.
Consistently great
They
is
want
nice.
it to be consistently great. We'll see. Last Phase 2? They ended up going on an 8-win streak. So we know that potential's there for this exact roster. And Mifflin, now I got to play catch up because I got a lot of primes in there, and I did make a promise, and I don't want to look like a fool. So it's Lol Trajan, Ethan 00, Lepidian Celeste. But Celeste is my older sister's name, by the way.
Another sick prime game, I think.
Metlar, as well as Claymath 52. There's El Raging Mexican. There's Anon Steve, 2D McBooty. That's a funny name, dude. Rilo 151.
How many more could
Look,
there
I'm
be?
going to scroll down. I think that was the last one, was Rilo 151. So thanks, everybody, for using your Prime sub here. And now I see a bunch of Bolt spam as well. This one's going to be interesting to see how these teams can match up, because it's not just can the Bolts show up today. It's can the Bolts show up today against an absolute powerhouse of a team that has been the Titans. The only people who have been consistently taking them down have been the Leviathans, and we've seen that this Titans team just seems to have an absolutely nutsos high end And I don't know, like, even their bad days don't seem to be that bad for them.
Yeah, their bad days are just okay days, and their good days are real good days on the Tartarus Titans. I think that it is just a team that is so difficult to lock down. They have been near the top for as long as the Tartarus Titans has been a legacy team, which is 2 years now, so maybe a crazier stat, more interesting how I said it initially than once I broke down how many years it's actually been. But they've earned their spot at the top by just being a very diverse team that doesn't generally play through the early game. I would consider the Tartarus Titans more so a like mid-game team that likes to dominate there and then transitions themselves very well in towards objective team fights. But maybe that is a weakness that could be exploited in the future. Maybe you can start to bring that fight a little bit earlier to the Tartarus Titans, see whether or not they can line up against it.
I think I'm learning why we don't normally do this, by the way. I've backed myself into a corner because there's way, way more going on. Brijan Mike, Ninja Cloud 321, shout outs to you. Brelin UK, thank you for subscribing. And so now, again, I'm learning things today and why we maybe don't do this. The Titans, though, Mifflin on the other side. Outside, and I'd have to go back and look at it just to see where their streaks are at. This is a team that last year tied the Bolts for an 8-win streak in a row. They did phenomenally. Right now, they're on a 3-win streak. The last time they lost, it was a 2-0 overall to the Leviathans. And so it's little things like that, right? For some reason, Leviathans know how to beat this squad. They did it 3-0 at Worlds. They did it again, I think, at the kick-in. They did it again during Phase 1. Like, they just keep on finding this matchup. But this team, especially with Solar Troll picked up for it, they've got the Bolts now, the Warriors later this week. They have such great potential. I think I even heard Cyclone at one point last week like complaining because he was like, oh man, I had to double my god pool this week, and he had to play 2 new gods. Like they're playing what they're playing, and they're playing it really well.
Yeah, it's almost reminiscent of the Leviathans in that's another team that just plays what they've been playing and say, hey, can you beat it? If not, tough for you if you can. I guess tough for us, and not many people have shown the propensity for the can. Not many people can take down either of those teams when they are playing their game, and the Tartarus Titans can count themselves amongst that squad. But that said, I think you bring up a great point around SOT being that new kind of adjustment for the Tartarus Titans. Adjustment air quotes, because I think he brings a lot of the same propensities, a lot of the same play style, a lot of the same communication tendencies as I would expect from their previous solo laner, Benji. Both quiet guys, both very mechanically talented, both have very large, diverse god pools. So I think, if anything, if the Tartarus Titans had to replace somebody, this one probably a little bit more plug and play, but Benji has earned the right as one of the best who have ever done it, / the GOAT, for a reason. So would be within the realm of acceptable kind of conditions, acceptable losses if the Tartarus Titans were to have struggled a little bit more so throughout the early portions of this year. They have not struggled.
No. I learned something important last week as well, and I think a lot of teams, I expect the Bolts might be on this list. Don't get Paul Zeus. As it turns out, if you give Paul a god that does a lot of damage, he's going to kill you, and he's going to do it really well. And Mifflin, I told you I backed myself into a corner. I'm going to keep going. Large rat.
Shouts.
Oh my God, it's Ehab. Sorry, I had to separate it. I was like, how do you say this one? Allergic to Smite. Grab yourself some Benadryl and an EpiPen, my man, because we're hanging out here, and we're going to continue going. But the good news is, earlier this week, Mifflin, we did get to talk to both of these teams specifically about their matchup, get a little bit more knowledge about how they're going to be going, how the Titans feel about the Bolts, how the Bolts feel about the Titans, so we can go ahead and listen in on what exactly their thoughts were on this matchup.
I think a lot of the time we kind of have a really good idea going into the sets. We just kind of struggle sometimes to execute on them. Sometimes it becomes like team play, and sometimes we'll get like a lead and then we'll get sloppy, and then we're not really communicating. So we're just got some stuff to work on in scrims, make sure that everybody's ready to go, and yeah, just use our energy and make sure we keep playing well.
I feel like we've done pretty good so far. I was expecting a little bit of a slower start from us just because we added a new player, but I think it's come together really well, and we've just been improving every week.
I think we kind of struggled a bit in our Jade set, which we kind of expected it to be, because they usually kind of turn up the gas once they play against us. I think we kind of just got to learn from that set, and adapt to what we failed. We kind of noticed instantly after the game what we lost in, so we're just gonna take that and then bring it to the Titans set.
I think it really helps that Layers and Solar Troll played on Scarabs last year because they're really good together already, and they still have that chemistry they had from playing with each other. And it's really surprising for the short amount of time that they played with each other last year. It's really carried over really well.
I think the Titans have done really well this year. I think they have a bit of like showing where they like stumbled last year, like they haven't really like grown too much, but they do play very, very well as a team together. So we just have to be ready for their team play. They are very, when they're a unit, they're very, very good, but sometimes they kind of fumble, similar to us, where they don't group up as fast and like kind of slow down the pace. So we're just gonna try to abuse that maybe and see if that's an opening. If not, we have some other ideas.
The Bolts have done really well. I think a lot of people are surprised about how well they did, but they're not surprised probably. I'm not really surprised either. Like they stuck together and they were a pretty good team last year, so it makes sense. Like a couple teams have some different players and then some teams are just moving here. But Bolts, same old, so they're ready to play.
The set score, we can only hope for a 2-0. I think our matchups into Titans, we haven't played them in a while, but I think usually in the regular season we do end up going up 2-0 to them. So I think that's going to be the outcome. We have a very good idea going into them, but it's all about executing for us. As long as we can execute, it'll be a clean 2-0.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do really well. I think it's gonna be 2-0.
To see how these two teams will match up again. I'm looking towards the Titans just because they feel like they have been just on a good streak. And the weird thing is, Mifflin, is like, you know, you expect it, especially with like the history of these guys, they are just kind of showing up to play SMITE. Like it is like you ask Paul. I love interviewing Paul because half the time you ask him any intricate question, anything about like their mentality, he's like, dude, I don't know. I'm just playing SMITE, dude. Like I don't know. I'm just good at it, I guess. Like he doesn't think of it too much, and it's been very fun. I'm gonna catch up on the ones that I missed during the video. Eggs Yolk 13, Reese. I scrolled down too fast. XD was the end of that one. That was nope. That's not the last. John Ossoff. _
The actual one?
Well, I guess we can find out subscribing all with Prime. And you know what? This is a good birthday present for Hindu Man. I want to send him this entire desk segment. No, I don't.
Don't send him
I
just
don't.
the sub list.
Just the sub list. Say, hey, look what Gord did today. It specifically credit me, even though that you're doing all the hard work, and I appreciate it for all of the subs. Either way, Mifflin, this one is incredibly back and forth between these two teams. I think overall, the recent history, I think, and that's like recency bias over the Titans.
Love that. My favorite kind of bias.
Is just a team that is really strong with a duo lane that seems nigh insurmountable, with a mid laner that, while I was giving him a little bit of hell last week saying that he has died more this phase than he did all of phase 3 last year.
Which is true.
Still finding nuts amounts of damage with a mechanical jungler and a mechanical solo laner that just seem to be able to bring things up. They are a team that feel like they are pushing their way already. It's phase 1. This is a team that has like worlds on their mind because they just lost the finals. Like they're tired of it.
Yeah, the Tartarus Titans, ever a team to keep the largest prize ever in their eyes, I suppose. But I think that it is interesting that we heard from Ven during that interview say some of the weaknesses of the Tartarus Titans that had revealed themselves throughout the course of the last year still seem to be here. See, I'm not a Tartarus Titans tier player. I'm not an SPL tier player. I couldn't tell you what weaknesses he's alluding to. Maybe it's something that I brought up earlier, that early game, a slight weakness for them.
Yeah.
I think when I think of the early game of the Tartarus Titans, it's, hey, did Layers' level 2 gank work in either solo or mid? If yes, their early game is looking real good. If no, they're waiting till mid game. Maybe that's something that Ven was talking about. I would love to hear his thoughts a little bit more in depth on that, but we won't get that opportunity as they're prepping for the match right now.
You don't want to like guerrilla interview, burst in there while they're getting ready for picks and bait. You'd get thrown out fast.
I do it already. Have you never watched? That's what I do.
No, but
that's
have you seen like their arms? Like they work out. Yeah. I think 3 of those Bolts guys are all going to just get up to toss you out. They're zoned in right now. So even if they are, I think very jovial, and you can see that there in Vin's face. They might not find it as amusing as we would. would, or as entertaining as probably a lot of Bolts fans would. This is going to be Picks and Bans. Game number 1, Titans, will be the first pick. Twirlaholic, by the way, thanks for the Prime Man, as well as UPR Sugar Nuts. Thank you
Excuse
as well
me?
for that one. Sugar Nuts, that was their name.
Understood.
Yeah, it's like a peanut covered in sugar. Come on, Mifflin.
Got you, man.
Get your head out of the gutter, my mans. Either way, it is going to be a fun one. Titans, ban out. Now, this is the wildest ban screen I have seen in a while. First ban, Poseidon. Second one, Nox. The third one's Dodgy. That one makes sense. The first two are like Bolts-only bans that you could get away with right now. I don't think any other team is taking a Poseidon and a Nox ban in the top 3.
No, Poseidon's win rate isn't even all that impressive right now, is it?
Like they won 2, but it was up against the Valks, so it's like it's a weird scales right now.
It is. The Tartarus Titans clearly dedicating some of their bans to directly target the Olympus Bolts. The Bolts, you could say targeted bans here. Zeus towards Paul, sure, but like Zeus in general, probably just a pretty good ban, as are Kleena and Yamoja. And the Tartarus Titans, with the space created by those targeted bans, instead of going towards something a little bit off-kilter, it's the Shiva picked up first overall, one that I think fits that man on your screen very well. Layers loves these style of picks, wants to play the things like Erlong Shen, and now that Erlong Shen no longer has knockup, maybe Shiva is going to be that next best, that most aggressive early game jungler that's got great CC lockdown. Essentially a knockup pull in on the first ability into a just normal knockup on the second ability that simultaneously gives you a whole lot of attack speed. This just in from production though. Maybe he would have taken Erlong if it were allowed, but with the rework, currently competitively banned. As
well as Yu Huang, for those of you who are wondering where exactly they're going to be. Not in SPL for a while. Usually it's a couple weeks after they make it into ranked, where you'll see a god trickle into the SPL just to make sure that everything is settled with them right after the first couple of weeks of balance adjustments, figuring out where they are and what their home's going to be like. How do you feel about the Shiva, though? Like, first pick, it's been relatively powerful. I think we've seen a lot of him lower down in priority. In fact, I can just go ahead and tell you exactly how many top picks like we've seen of him so far. One first pick where he's had it, and yeah, so like a little bit of pressure there was the Valks. He's been in the top 3-4 times, so like he's kind of prioritized, but it hasn't been as heavily up until now.
I think that, and it's something that's going to be true of all new gods in the meta. I need to see more from them. What I've seen so far, glimpses of hope for Shiva in being a top priority pick. Glimpses of how dominant this god can be. I think he fits himself very well into the category patented by Hindu Man, happy birthday. Yeah. Feast or Famine. He's either going to dominate or he's not going to do a whole lot. And that's generally going to be true of these melee, in-your-face junglers that go for high damage output builds. I'm talking about the Jotun straight into Brawlers beat stick, that style of build. If you're playing a god like Shiva, like Erlong Shen, where, like Bakasura, Arachne, anyone that's auto-attacking you as an assassin, you are either going to be very far ahead and nobody wants to auto-attack you because you win the DPS trade, or you fall behind and all of a sudden you are losing DPS trades, and that's what you bring to your team is generally just damage. I think Shiva finds himself in that position, does at least have the fallback of, hey, I could start dancing, I'm CC immune, I'm real slippery, and I'm healing my team and giving them more mana. Very good around elongated objective fights, but also in the early game, you kind of want that ultimate for damage.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to watch how I guess the dynamic, right, that comes about with him. It is something we saw, a couple times in solo. I know you prefer him in the jungle, and that's something I think Layers also prefers him in the jungle, so I can imagine the Titans, he's just sitting there going, gimme. And with Achilles, well, it's a little bit of a toss-up because both of them work well. Although Achilles, it feels like an execute, whenever we see the execute, works really well into the Guardians and solo, right? Like, I feel like I've seen a lot of Achilles solos versus, like, Cthulhu's versus the RDOs. I'm also going to throw out, like, LSDers, Black Ops Spartan, thanks for the Prime subs.
I thought you had more picks.
And, it's going to be very, very fun. Yeah, you thought, but now you don't know. Achilles alongside the Khepri here get locked in for the Titans. Khepri's another, I think, really, really important pick, but that's the top 3 for the Titans. RDO and Thoth. Thoth at the beginning of this phase, Mifflin, in the beginning of Season 9, was like the god. Everyone was talking about how insane it felt to play him. Granted, there was a lot of conversation that were like, okay, he feels really good, but in casuals and ranked, how's that going to translate to competitive play? Like, at the end of the day, he's still Thoth. Same thing we were saying about Zeus. Guess what? Zeus has been doing well. Thoth has followed him pretty well up to the top of the tier list.
Yeah, I remember back when Thoth first released, it was the conversation of, yeah, he does a ton of damage, but it takes a really long time to hit those power spikes. It was almost a similar conversation around Kali at the time. For you old heads in the chat that remember when you had to, like, tie up your shoes, you had to buy boots in Smite, okay? And that slowed down your build. I
Do
promise.
you not tie your shoes?
No, I tied them once when I bought them, and I just slide my feet in now.
Oh, I
but
tie mine every day.
yeah, that's awesome. All right.
I think
Stop
you just
flexing on me.
I think you just called me old. Though.
No, can I
think
just
that's where
can
this
I do
got.
my thing?
Yeah,
about
I'm
both?
sorry. You're right.
So like, so when you had to buy boots, it slowed down your build, which made these late game gods that much weaker because
Yes.
it slowed you down by 1,700 or so gold. So the Kalis, the Thos of the world have only become stronger since you haven't had to purchase that item. So that late game power spike comes a lot more quickly, and Thoth has benefited mightily from it. I think that is one of the major facets that brought him back into the meta, alongside this double flat pen style of build, Divine Ruin, Spear of Desolation, very strong in their own regard. But the conversation around Thoth now is, what's the counter? It's probably just dive. And Shiva and Achilles, they both bring plenty of dive to your comp. You can have the double dash combat roll from Achilles. You can have Shiva, essentially one of the most mobile warriors in the game. CC immune, can't be rooted off with that evade and punish. Double dash as well. It's pretty easy for them to get into that back line.
I'm going to throw out Randy as well as Grimble for the Prime subs, and
His name's Gremble?
Grimble.
Just Gremble.
Just Grimble.
That's
I'll
awesome.
scroll back up just to double check.
That's
there's no.
awesome.
Yeah, it's just Grimble. And well, it's Randy YX. So they had two Ys and an X. So maybe Grimble,
How do you know that's not Rendix?
just because of how you normally use things like that. Either way, Atlas locked in. Atlas, you go back about a month ago, Hurriwin talking a ton about how this was going to be a top pick. A lot of these teams, I think, love him. And you got to think about this, Mifflin.
Yep.
Let's look at the gravity pool,
Uh-huh.
which is Atlas 2 out there. That's in a small cone, which I guess actually matches up with what I'm going to compare it to. It's just a faster cooldown Fenrir ult, and you're tankier.
Wow, I had not heard
Okay,
it like
fam.
contextualized that way, but yeah, I don't think you're far off. Atlas is really good. You've also got defense shred, a global ultimate, a dash that is a massive burst that also cleanses slows from your team. You've got an adaptable pull, throw out the Astrolabe first, all of a sudden now you've locked down an entire area in a jungle team fight that you could pull people in towards as well. So I think Atlas still slightly slept on in the SPL, but certainly starting to show some of these teams are valuing him and willing to pick him. Now the Olympus Bolts can be counted amongst those. That said,
cannot hit
interesting
what you
matchup into
cannot
Jingwei.
see.
You might be able to hold on to her for a little bit, but the second you toss her out, she could just dash away.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, I guess, in the duo lane dynamic, because, like, yeah, you can't pick up Jingwei.
Well, you can't pick her up.
Well, you can. It's not just maybe not as helpful. You can pick up Kepri, and he's got a big old hitbox, so it might be easier, but it's Kepri, so maybe late game, I see that hell, and that's where things are going to be,
Cleanses.
I think, even more problematic. Mifflin, I've backed myself into a corner. I got to keep going here.
Please.
Modaddy, Zelborg, and Lazaron 14. Thanks
was
for
that
the
first one
Prime
again?
subs. It was Modaddy.
Got it.
Ionized, and I'm scrolling down. Cool, I caught up. 5-on-5, you see this, the hell comes into the equation. You got the Scarab's Blessing, you got Shiva Heal. Feels like a lot that the Titans have going for them. Long range, good damage, global presence coming down from the Bolts, though. Who do you see lasting? Not just early game, you had mentioned that maybe being a weak point, but then going into the late game, who could maybe take on some of those 5-on-5s around FG?
Looking at early game compositions, I think mid 3v3 probably going to favor the Tartarus Titans. I put that much value on Shiva's early. That said, Gilgamesh still pretty strong in his own regard, but Hell's damage output at like level 3, just incredibly strong. You've got a great deal of sustain there as well. And once Kepri takes over to level 5, I mean, who are you killing? You've got CC immunity available to your entire team thanks to the cleanse from Hell. You've got death immunity for at least one guy with Scarab's Blessing. So the Tartarus Titans might look to play there as their bridge into the mid to late game. Whereas the Olympus Bolts late game composition, it's just gross, man. You've got massive space control potential from the RDO. You've got great space control from Atlas. Gilgamesh with Winds of Shamash, just a phenomenal team fight tool. Thoth can be, at some points, difficult to dive, but if the Tartarus Titans have a lead going into the late game, probably pretty easy thanks to the nature of their composition. And then we've seen what the Tartarus Titans have been able to do with this Chernobog pick. Just sit in lane, take out a tier 2 tower, jump into somebody's shadow, Peter Pan style, and just eliminate them. I think there's some potential for that here as well, especially into a matchup like Chernobog up against Jingwei. Jingwei does not win that 1v1 in the late game, and she generally does not match that same level of global presence. So if the Olympus Bolts can equalize the early and take themselves too late, I think they've got a significant advantage. but whether or not they can survive the onslaught of a Shiva Achilles Hell, well, that's yet to be seen.
It's going to be fun, I think, the early game to see what they can do. I mean, it doesn't feel like Hell has... I always say this. I always feel like I say Hell's
She
early
does so
game.
much.
She does so much damage
I'm not
early
sleeping
on
on it
that, like,
anymore.
at level 2, it's almost insane how much
Like
she's able to
4
do.
to 500.
We'll see how good Paul typically looks on this Hell and how well it matches up into a great late game Bolts composition here in game number 1.
Game number 1 of the last week of the phase here in the SPL in Season 9, and it is the Olympus Bolts versus the Tartarus Titans. This is an exciting one to start off with as Charlie joins me. Doug, I believe, working the cameras for us here today. No, it's Rosie. I'm wrong. I'm 0 for 1 already. It is Doug. I lied. It's Doug. I'm 0 for 2 somehow. I'm wrong again. It's the Olympus Bolts and the Titans. There we go. It's Doug. It's Dawson and Trelly for the Titans and the Bolts. And what a way to start off this week here, Trelly. Because I think both of these two teams playing some very, very good Smite right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I truthfully believe, I think this will be either, I think this set could be a 2-0 for the Titans, just as likely as like a 3-game win for the Bolts. I think the Bolts and how they operate in these early games may just dictate how long and how competitive of a set we get.
So by that logic, there's no possible way the Bolts could 2-0 is what you're saying.
I'm saying of the possible outcomes,
Right.
I think a Bolts 2-0 is less likely than a Titans 2-0 or a Bolts 2-1.
All right.
But I think either team is just as likely to win. My thought, though, is that we're going to get a really good idea of what type of set we're going to get in the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game. If the Bolts, if they show up, if Lasbra is able to get active early, if the rest of the team, really awesome Jake and Vera in this dual lane, can stabilize, maybe even get some pressure going, I think we got a very competitive set on our hands. And the Bolts have shown us that if the consistency is there, they're one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking at this jungle matchup, though, the Shiva versus Gilgamesh. I mean, you want to get active early on this Shiva. Big layers right here, trying to show some face over on Haddix. I don't think there's going to be any kill opportunity. Haddix already pretty tanky in his own right with the build, but staying at that tower line. I think you're right to highlight, though, that Lasbra right now on this Gilgamesh has the blink available, is going to have to get active early. And looking at Paul on this Hell pick, we haven't seen too much of it as of recently. It was very popular last season. I mean, it was banned away quite a lot, but now I imagine it's going to be pretty solid against this Atlas specifically, trying to cleanse those pulls, things like that. But I have to imagine Lasbra's going to be looking at this Hell in the mid lane. I mean, it seems like a pretty free kill, at least in the early portion of the game. And Paul looks like he knows it. He's going to stay at that tower line.
I have to imagine, Trelly, that Divine Ruin feels like a very strong first or second item for Ven here out of mid. Going up against that Hell, of course, you're going to be worried about healing later on throughout the game, and then of course layers with that ultimate as well, and then some healing just whether itemization wise or otherwise in the rest of the Titans. I think Divine Ruin makes some sense anyway with how builds are going. Lasbra could consider some anti-heal at some point, Brawler's Beat Stick maybe, but I agree. I wonder if there's going to be some activity here around mid lane. And speaking of the jungle matchup, and you mentioned how the dynamic may look, I think Layers has really latched on to this Shiva. Like, if we've seen all of the players who have played it over the last few weeks in the SPL, seen it a lot for the Valkyries and Kirmi. Like, I think Layers is probably way up there in the play rate on this pick as well. I think it's been a strong look for the Titans, and they will look to defend or invade rather the blue buff. Here's Layers, gets aggressive, but he drop kicked against the wall by Lasbra, and there should be damage, and there sure is. Lasbra first blood in this set over to the Olympus Bolts now. SOT running for the hills, looks like was able to pick up the blue buff, but will it cost him his life? Stun is out from the Achilles, and Laz has gotta leave, but that's a rotation from the mid lane. Ven in, and Ven assist.
That's a beautiful gank there. Even Paul was trying to help out, but was not able to make it in time. So that blue buff invade, not going to be very worth for the Titans right now, especially because, I mean, just 2 kills is not going to be that massive. But look who the kills are on. Haddix in this solo lane is going to be devastating with a lead, and especially Lasbra is able to use this lead pretty much everywhere on the map right now. We can see where Lasbra's looking at right now, doing that green buff. Could look over towards duo lane. And speaking of these duo lanes, not a very aggressive duo lane for either of these teams right now. Chernobog and Jingwei, 2 picks that don't really want to get active early. I mean, I have to bring this up because when Barra was in the studio doing this ADC tier list, he spoke a lot about how he hated this Death Toll Crusher build and he was tired of it, and he said that you pretty much have to build it. Right now, we're not seeing either of these hunters go that. They have the Gilded Arrow, and they're probably going into those Dev Gauntlets, so a completely different start and completely different build. Probably not going to see too much fighting happening in this duo, at least for a little bit.
And Charlie, that's not a build we've seen in what feels like maybe a couple like consistently seen in a couple seasons at this point. It feels like Devourer's Gauntlet or Bloodforge with everyone you could afford was Season 7, all the rage, maybe early in Season 8, and things changed around at some point later on in Season 8. But I think you're right in the direction of both of these builds. Look, hunters have always talked, at least our SPL hunters have talked about how the lanes, outside of some jungle pressure, maybe an overstep by one of the dual lanes, feels like it's a farm fest for the the first 10-15 minutes of the game. Eventually you get strong enough to want to rotate in and fight. And I think that's an important point here in this game when you talk about rotating in. Of course, Jingwei, very safe. The airstrikes for engage or disengage in the fight could be fight changing. But I think Barracuda and his ability to impact the map in general on this Chernobog with a global ultimate is such a strong utility piece that hopefully the Bolts are able to take advantage of.
Right, and we get to look at something else in there because the Dev Gauntlet stacks, usually we just look at the Gauntlet of Thieves stacks, right? You're like, hey, right now Aurora finished the Gauntlet of Thieves first, so he's going to be stacking that earlier. We can see a little bit of a lead there, but Barracuda already finished the Dev Gauntlet stack, so that's up 13 stacks up right now. That's going to help him out a little bit. We can keep our eye on that and see who's farming more effectively, but I think you're right to highlight that. This Chernobog, I mean, Jingwei can sort of follow the rotations a little bit. She can fly about past that tier 2 tower, give or take, a little bit before that, but Chernobog can go across the map, man. It really just depends on where the fighting is. If you're sending Jingwei to stop the split push, Barracuda is going to be getting there a lot faster in these fights, so you definitely have to watch out for that. I will say, there's no teleport available. SOT had to go for those beads, so Haddix has the teleport. That's two real global presences that you have to watch out for because the RDO can essentially go to anywhere on the map once that's upgraded, and Barracuda can go to any character on the map once he gets that ability and is able to use it effectively. So it's going to be pretty annoying to deal with the Bolt, especially with the lead right now. They have the objective shred. They have a fair bit of it in the Chernobog and the Gilgamesh, so they're going to have to watch out for the ward game on these Gold Fears.
And when you consider the fact, Trelly, that teleport is on one side of the map and the Churn ultimate is on the entire other side of the map, regardless of the objective, it's going to be a rotation in. Aurora is low here. That's a decent knockup from Cyclone Spin. There's way too much collapse here from the Olympus Bolt. Scarab Blessing is out. And I love the hesitancy here from the Bolt. Scarab's Blessing is out. You don't know where Layers or Paul are. Let's abandon this. One kill is not worth overextending for. We've already gotten his ultimate. And that's honestly, I think that's an overchase that the Bolts of last year or the Renegades of the year before end up taking, and they end up losing that fight. And so I admire the safety there in that moment to not chase down the kill onto Aurora.
Yeah, especially when you put so much. I mean, it wasn't that much they put into it, but they chased it a fair bit. You get the shell down. Aurora probably should have been a free kill because of how far up he was, but you're right. That was some good heads-up play to realize, hey, we probably don't want to dive this right now. We haven't seen Paul in the mid, and Layers could be anywhere at this point on this Shiva pick. But I also want to highlight the fact that usually we see Shiva, and he gets very active early, right? And you think that's sort of where he falls off. He's like a pseudo-Thanatos, where he has this early pressure, and then late game he doesn't do much. SEC yesterday, Magic Feet was playing the Shiva pick and was actually popping off in the late, like 40 minutes.
Was that like full damage build?
Yeah, it was. It was the CAD shield and the Berserkers. Besides that, pretty much full damage. So this Shiva can come online pretty hard late game as well. I don't think we're going to see, just because Layers has fallen 0-1 right now in the game, I don't think that's going to dissuade him from getting active. And right now, this blue buff could be looked at. And there's a lot of Bolts here.
No, the Titans need Layers to get something going here. Remember, Aurora already used that Scarab's Blessing. We'll be down for another few seconds. Good double pull in from Awesome Jake. But the dash is away from the Titans, strong enough. Looks like blue buff might be abandoned as well. The Olympus Bolts want to hold on to their 1,000 gold lead as effectively as they can. Sot will head back over. And he'll have the blue buff in that back pocket as well. Paul hasn't been jumped on yet. We wondered if there might be some pressure onto this Helen mid with Cleanse and Beads. Paul is safe enough for the time being, but Nosbra hasn't even turned his eyes there yet. Wondered if we would see anti-heal prioritized early. I think Divine Ruin was an easy first item for Ven to choose. And usually, I guess Jotun's maybe the first item for Gilg, but I guess with a Hell on the other side, Brawlers, again, maybe makes a much simpler choice for Laz. So early anti-heal, and of course some flat pen on both of those items. actually synergized pretty well with what the Bolts are looking for.
Yeah, Lazarus not yet gone on the quest just yet either, so just as the Brawlers have not gotten that first item from the Gilgamesh pass, but it must be in a terrible spot if he hasn't went for it yet. Layer's taking a lot of damage here and will not get hit by that final judgment. But Paul sort of coined this like do more in a breastplate build when you think you're going to be, you know, tanking a lot of physical damage.
Right.
This time around though, looks like he's going into Genji's guard, so putting a little bit more stock into the Thoth poke, the Atlas damage, and of course the RDO is certainly going to be diving him a lot. So a little bit more magic defense on this Hell, as well as some cooldown resets is definitely going to help him out. Not only in the survivability, but cooldowns is essentially damage. The more you have your abilities up, the more you can do. So I like that he's recognizing, hey, the Gilgamesh and the Chernobog, they're going to do some damage, but Breastplate probably not the option here. Going to make a little bit of rotation. Could be the Shoguns as well, I suppose. But knowing Paul, probably wants the cooldown resets on the Genji, so that's going to be the option there. But another just a little slap fight over here in the solo lane.
Yeah, Paul, look, Paul is the king of pushing sort of these slightly lower overall damage builds to their absolute limit, right? I mean, you'll get a damage item here and there, or a defense item rather here and there, and still be able to do massive damage numbers. So I think this is something that Paul is very, very used to. Now, we did note the similar start to the build over in duo lane for both of the Hunters. Devourer's Gauntlet now fully stacked for both, but on one side, Cyclone Spin more focused on the chin size, Health Shred, with his second item, whereas Barracuda immediately into crit Trelly. What do you think maybe gives Barracuda the idea here? Chin size, Xe, Asi. Well, maybe not Asi. It's a little bit too much healing. What do you think maybe has Barracuda thinking crit early on?
I just think Cyclone is going to benefit from the kin size because he has the crit built into the kit, whereas Barracuda probably wants to try and box in this lane, right? You want to be able to fight that. Hold that thought. Cyclone's getting dove here.
And you do want to use the ultimate to initiate on left. Aurora rooted in place. Dropkick is in as well. There's the Scarab's Blessing, and it connects. You got to burst down Aurora on the other end, but you're not able to do it quickly enough. If you're the Olympus Bolts, now Layers will chase down Laz. Laz will jump away, but there's just too much range on the ultimate out of the Shiva. Into the wall, I guess onto the wall goes Barracuda, knocked to the side on the other end. And the Tartarus Titans in a 2-kill swing return the favor. They'll pull some of this golden experience back.
That was such a sick knockout by Cyclone. I mean, there was nowhere Barrac could go at that point. If you dash out of the wall, you're going to get whooped no matter what. SOT makes the rotation over, and they immediately are pulling this Gold Fury. Final Judgment is available, but Ben doesn't even know what's happening or doesn't want to show face, so this one's going to go down.
Yeah, I think this one pretty easy for the Tartarus Titans. And that is just a bit of an overextension from the Olympus Bolts. You have to know that Scarab's Blessing is going to be there. And you maybe figure that you got enough burst damage on the other end to finish off Aurora, but it wasn't there. And Aurora will live. And we already see an early example of a Scarab's Blessing really turning around a fight in this game. How annoying that ultimate can be to fight against, where you pour everything into one character, you don't get the kill. And this time it's not even not getting the kill. It really bites the Bolts as they lose not only the Gold Fury, but 2 kills on the left side of the map. Closes up the gold gap, as Doug just showed us, and the experience starts to swing back even further towards Cyclone Spin. The fact that the experience is even is more an indicator that a couple of the other members of the Bolts are maybe a bit ahead in their respective roles. The Cyclone Spin's about 1.5 levels up over Barracuda. 2 levels just a second ago after everything that happened just now over on left. And it's now such a strong side of the map for the Titans to fight around.
Yeah, the tier 1 tower did fall in right, so Haddix obviously, most of that XP is probably on him at the moment, having that pressure in lane. SOT has not really been able to make an impact in that lane since the early gank, so just making the rotation over to Gold Fury, that's going to help out a ton. So SOT's trying to be a team player more than a lane player, and it's working out so far. I mean, the Titans were able to answer back, and now the gold is in their favor, but it really just depends when is Haddix going to make these rotations, because that's who's ahead right now, right? You want to play off your lead. Looking at duo lane, as we just saw, isn't going to go too well. Scarab's Blessing pretty much denying all the gank that you just had. You overextend, Paul makes the rotation in, and then things just don't go your way. So where else are you going to look? Do you look in the mid lane? Right now, Paul's been positioning pretty perfectly, staying out of that tower, so there's really no kill potential there. The only thing the Bolts can do at the moment is try to go in a duo or play off a solo lane. And since the tower's gone, why not go for the Pyromancer?
We're going to fight over the Pyromancer, ends up being the question. If we're over here on right, you've got Cyclone Spin out of the fight if you're the Bolts, and you can ult in if you're Barracuda. SOT rooted in place. Pyromancer is low, won't get stolen away by Sot, will be confirmed by the Bolts. Barracuda has ulted here. He goes into the wall. Out he dashes, but SOT somehow has the damage on the other side of it, and Barracuda dies anyway. Pyromancer for Barra, as Layers and Cyclone Spin were over on left. So Barracuda on the Chernobog now falls to 0-2. Been a tough road now over the last couple of minutes for the dual lane side of the map of the Bolts. At least you're able to get that neutral objective over in the FG pit. Been an important trade out for SOT.
Yeah, unfortunate for Barra. A little bit too weak on that ultimate. Probably held it for a little bit too long, or maybe just got CC chained. Didn't end up using the beads and didn't even have the Aegis available. So nice heads up play by Layers, recognizing, hey, you guys can defend that Pyromancer, but I'm going to try and get Cyclone Spin ahead right now. Has already finished the Silver Branch bow. Essentially, you've reached like late game Jingwei damage items, right? You already have full Dev Gauntlets, you have Hidden Sights and Silver Branch. You're going to get some crits from the second ability if you're maxing that one up. So it's going to be a solid amount of shred if you are this Jingwei, trying to match some of that tank stats that Haddix already has built in. So I was mentioning, you know, when is Haddix going to make these rotations? Right now, he might be getting shredded when he does make those rotations, because Cyclone Spin is very much ahead. And look where Barracuda has to sit in this lane, right at that tier 2 tower. Has some wards down, but really can't push up past here. You never know where Layers is if he hasn't shown face yet.
Yeah, depending on where Layers walks. I mean, if you go right down the middle of the left side of the jungle through the Fury Pit, just now ward gets dropped over by the purple buff. But, yeah, Barra's living life beneath the tier 2 tower for a little while here. I look at some support itemization here as well, both looking very similar at the moment, despite Aurora being a couple levels ahead. Able to go back and pick up the Bracer, and awesome Jake still sitting at level 11, hasn't been able to get that second relic just yet. But again, another early anti-heal item for the Olympus Bolts. Contagion gets added by awesome Jake. And then just the Wind Demon from Barracuda is enough for Aurora to feel like the Spectral Armor and SOT to feel like the Spectral Armor is a worthwhile pickup. And so Trelly, a lot of the early damage that Barra had with just some of that crit online, going to get mitigated by Spectral. Maybe diversifies a bit now as Barracuda has added the chin size.
Yeah, that looks like a pivot to me. I don't think Barra wanted to go into the chin size there, but once he saw the Spectrals itemize this SOT, he's going to get real aggressive onto this red buff. There's really nothing to fight over just yet. Primal Fury, about 38 seconds out. Barracuda taking a lot of damage as well. They're just bullying at this point. The Bolts cannot really post up here, and they're going to have to retreat. Primal Fury still has about 30 seconds, and they're just trying to get as many relics or ultimates down as they can. Final Judgment, though, still the best confirmed tool on the map because of the way Paul is itemized. Doesn't really, not able to outburst that because you did go for that Genji's guard in that slot. So you don't have that much damage just yet, but full Obsidian Shard means you're still going to be chunking these tanks.
Wow, I mean, if you look at the net worth charts as we will fight in mid, triple pull from Awesome Jake is miraculous, but no damage in to follow up. Then could have been in range, but won't end up being there. And this fight is disengaged. There's about 1,000, 600-700 gold, close to 1,000 gold that the Titans are ahead. Would be fully 1,000 if this Primal Fury gets confirmed. Venenu's going to be in range. He'll charge up the Final Judgment. Won't let it fly as the Titans confirm the Primal Fury. Look for a chase. Chase won't be there. But really, what I'm trying to shine a light on is now in 1,500 gold, how far ahead Cyclone Spin is. Cyclone Spin's at 10,000 net worth. Barracuda, up until recently, was about 1,000 gold behind. Still about 1,000 gold behind is Barracuda. 9,400 to 10,400. And so 1,500 gold is what the Titans are up right now. Maybe a bit closer to 2,000 over the last couple of seconds. Half of that is in Cyclone Spin over Barracuda. And so Cyclone is in such a strong spot now, Trilly. I have to imagine the Titans are going to try to get this Jingwei as involved as possible.
Yeah, once Cyclone starts rotating, though, Barracuda does have that option and just sort of sit in lane, push as much farm as possible, go for the tier 1, maybe the tier 2, and then use the Nightmare to ult in and still affect those team fights. So Chernobog is one of those characters that doesn't hate to be behind. You don't love it. Obviously, you're not going to want to box and don't have that fighting potential, but because Layers has shown so much face, Barracuda really can't farm freely. I mean, we've seen he's been stuck at that tier 2 tower pretty much exclusively this game once that tier 1 was able to go down. But it looks like Cyclone Spin is going to head over towards Fire Giant, and Barracuda's going to do just that, sort of sit in that lane and try to farm up. The question is, are they going to pull this? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, you could pull the Pyro. Once it respawns, it's an easier pull. Roar sends an auto attack towards the FG. It's an 18-minute Fire Giant. Remember, Barra can ult in, but you got to go to somebody on the enemy team. That's the downside. He goes to SOT. Relatively easy choice now as Barracuda makes his way to the right side of the map. Sot uses Fatal Strike to get out the roots on the Cyclone Spin. And now the priority targets on the Titans have to disengage. Scarab's Blessing has already been used as well. Cyclone Spin with the airstrike had to get out, and only Barra's ult has been utilized. The Olympus Bolts have an opening now. They will pull the Pyromancer. They will secure the Pyromancer. Could be a fight, though, after the fact. Ben with the Final Judgment, no good. Glasbro with Winds of Shamash engages over on the right. It's a stun onto SOT. Jake lets his ultimate fly on through the map. A pull in onto Sot makes things interesting, but Barracuda will go onto the wall, dash on out. Glasbro's been left alone in this fight as well. You need Ven in the backline to find some confirmed kills here if you're the Olympus Bolts, and it is just not there, as Haddix has been left alone, and Haddix will be the only one to die.
Yeah, once the final judgment goes down, I think that fight's over. You really don't have any burst. Awesome Jake will get stunned out here. They're going to have to keep running. Cyclone Spin dashes in. They're not afraid of this at all. They have the hell healing. They have the sustain. They're going to pull this Fire Giant. They're not going to be worried about it. I think once Ven's ult misses or doesn't get any value there, the fight's pretty much done. You have to burst down a healer.
And Ven just had no mana. I mean, Ven was full health at the end of that fight, but literally had 0 mana to find any more damage in the back of this engagement. The Fire Giant is low, but burning somewhat slowly. That's a drop kick onto Paul. But Glasbro has to leap away now. SOT has been pulled into the rest of the Olympus Bolts. There is a fatal strike target, but the target for the Tartarus Titans was the FG. And those are tense moments, but it's juggled effectively by the Titans. And the Titans will find a pick, find the big objective, sub 20 minutes. A massive win here in the late game for the Tartarus Titans.
Yeah, Cyclone Spin gets a kill there, ticks over to level 20, finishes an Executioner now. I mean, this is just so much damage out of this Jingwei. I mean, currently, SOT's top of the damage charts because Jingwei's more so hitting the objectives at the moment, but these late game fights, it's going to be hard for Haddix to exist with how much penetration Cyclone has. Obviously, awesome Jake, level 13, 7 levels down from the ADC of the Tartarus Titans. Probably going to be hard to set up anything right now, even though itemize into that Contagion, a little bit of Fizz-D with the fully stacked Gauntlet of Thieves, but I imagine that Pridwin's going to be a little way off, probably too much gold you don't have at the moment to finish that one up, so Jake is going to have some hard times trying to frontline here. We'll upgrade that Fortifying Shell, which will help out a little bit, but the Tartarus Titans have a lot of gold on the map to acquire right now. That tier 1 in mid and right, and then 3 tier 2 towers. If you're the Olympus Bolts, you have to try and defend this. I mean, the gold lead's going to climb too far if you don't.
Right, I mean, it's still close enough at this point, gold lead-wise, where you're maybe feeling okay. If all of these towers go down, I think you're right, Trelly. This just gets out of hand, and the Titans too good a team to just completely throw away what type of gold lead could be built up. Cyclone Spin does way too much damage to these towers. Nobody from the Bolts will rotate to the left side of the map, so tier 2 on left is gone. Cyclone, I was wondering if might get some free poke damage into the Phoenix, but now the Bolts leave the tier 2 in mid as well, and so the Bolts showed some face, Trelly, but that's about it. Back away from both of the tier 2 towers. Lasbra, in the meantime, is pushing down the right side of the map. And Oni Fury's going to spawn here shortly, and so with 2 minutes left on the FG buff itself, Tartarus Titans able to open up left and mid Phoenix. Looks like we'll be able to come back from base, spend up some of that gold, and snag themselves an Oni Fury.
I'm honestly interested in what Cyclone's going to finish this build with. Probably some crit because of the Ornate Arrow, and it looks like one of the Shurikens will be the option here. Obviously, you have the Chin Size, Silver Branch, and Xe, so you have a ton of health shred as well as penetration, but with Jingwei, you have crit already. You got Ornate Arrow, so you're going to get more crits, so might as well go into both. At this point, Jingwei probably can just shred everyone as well as the tanks and the squishy targets, so Cyclone Spin still got to be the focus right now. I mean, Paul is healing everyone up, so usually you want to try to kill the healer right away, but with how much damage Cyclone Spin is able to output to the tanks and the squishy targets respectively, I mean, you got to shut down Jingwei as well, right? Both of these tier 2 towers in mid and left are gone. Layers is leading the charge here. He's on a ward though, so they probably not want to blink in just yet. They're going to go for this left Phoenix. The gold lead, they were able to back and spend that gold, so right now the Titans are using every bit of this 6K gold lead they have. They got about a minute on Fire Giant. We'll have to see if they go for this push.
This is crazy. This has been a game that's almost been won just by the potential of what could happen to the Bolts. I mean, if you look at the KDAs, Vera's 0-2. And, like, that's the only bad one, right? And there's only, and everyone else on the Titans is kind of equal to their counterparts, except for Cyclone Spin, who's ahead. So Cyclone Spin has been ahead this game.
Right.
It's been the potential of what could happen in a fight with a Jingwei that has kept the Bolts playing a little bit more cautiously. They haven't been able to finish off kills. In a 4-2 game, with how dominant the Titans have been, you'd think we were 35 minutes in, 40 minutes in with kind of how the map state is with this low amount of kills, but the Titans have just been able to drive it. Though Barracuda is starting to catch up a little bit as far as XP goes. Cyclone Spin has been level 20 for the last 5 minutes, so it's all been catch up for Barracuda. And Awesome Jake has been sitting on Thebes, Contagion, and no completed item for what feels like forever. Now that's a lot of the ground that the Olympus Bolts are going to hope to make up here over the next few minutes. Definitely not far out of it enough yet, though, Trell. I mean, the Titans, don't get me wrong, in commanding control of this game. The Bolts are able to get out of that first FG without losing a Phoenix, and so that's one help to the Bolts' cause going into this next Fire Giant fight. There's a handy lead for the Titans in what would be likely a game-ending fight, but the Bolts still strong enough, I think, Trelly. You might need to step up and try to contest this with how your base is looking.
Yeah, I think the reason that these builds aren't getting completely out of control is Jake is starving himself from farm on purpose, it seems, letting his carries try to catch up. He's going to stay level 14 for this reason, not really group up on these waves. He's going to sit in the jungle, maybe get some backhand, things like that. I see Jake do this a lot, where the team is not necessarily ahead and they really need the farm. So Jake sort of puts himself behind to make sure that the carries are able to do that damage. Jake has some relics. He's a little bit tanky in that regard, so he can try and heal himself up. But Haddix taking a little bit of poke here. The Fire Giant is about to spawn in.
Yeah, 3 seconds away from spawning in, still 5 minutes away from being enhanced Fire Giant. It's a good point there, Trelly. If we could see net worth, I'm curious where, I mean, I imagine Jake, yeah, somewhere towards the bottom, about 2,000 down from a roar. So a hefty deficit as far as net worth goes for Awesome Jake. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's close somewhat in all the other roles. It's kept the Bolts relevant. Fire Giant being worked down, and it is burning fast, but the Titans don't want to commit in. When there's a final judgment on the other side, you need to be able to confirm the objective, or at least put pressure onto Ven, force him to back away. Final judgment's charged, but put back into the holster. Titans will sustain up here just a little bit. Of course, there's anti-heal all across the Bolts, but Titans will be able to back away around Paul and top off some of those health bars when need be.
These extended fights are really going to be the benefit of the Titans. They are continuously tanking this up, and it looks like Ben still has the ult. They're going for it.
What do the Bolts now suddenly turn onto the objective? Now the Titans, they confirm the FG. Though a final judgment made its way into the pit. SOT has got the first fatal strike, and he has got a Scarab's Blessing in the back pocket, double stun as the Achilles flies in. Barracuda's ulted into the backline, and now the Chernobog is all alone. Then Jake and Barra, the last 3 members of the Bolts, are on the map, and the Tartarus Titans have somehow confirmed the objective, and they've got eyes for the Bolts base.
I mean, Jingwei basic attack, 150 damage, was able to out-confirm final judgment. Layers blinks in, he might be able to find Jake too here. They're gonna go for the chase.
That's an auto and a blink in from Layers. Goodbye, Jake, to follow Ven. And Barracuda is going to watch his Phoenix fall. And barring a miracle play, this game will come to an end. The Tartarus Titans, they didn't need to do a whole lot of killing to get this one done, and the Titans will take game number 1.
All they needed was to get Cyclone in some duo pressure. He was able to make sure that objective shred down. Paul keeps the whole team sustained, and as you said, the fear of what could happen was enough to make sure the Bolts really couldn't contest anything. They didn't lose anything too hard. They just lost a lot of little things that started to add up there.
Only, what, a couple duo lane fights that we saw for the first 15-20 minutes of this game, and then 1 Fire Giant fight for the Titans after everything else was just what could happen, and the Bolts didn't want to find out that answer. And a great fight around the Fire Giant there towards the end. I think SOT really steps up on that Achilles. And the ability to confirm, I mean, look, that's just an auto attack from Cyclone Spin through a final judgment. Then, you know, probably wants that one back. You're playing a game of really thin margins. Would the FG have made all of the difference in the world with the way the rest of that fight went?
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Would have looked nice, though, around the waist of the Olympus Bolts. Doesn't matter, though. The Tartarus Titans take game number 1. Could be a 2-0, like we might have thought happened. Find out if that's the case right after this.
The Titans come out on top in game number 1. It is, I think, a very early game start there, Mifflin, for the Bolts. Really good gank onto Solo. And then that's about all they get in terms of kill potential. A lot of control that comes down from the Titans. I mean, just watching the way they transition into the team fights, I think the healing got a little overwhelming, I guess is the right term. And they went into like the brawlers. They had the Divine. They tried their best, but unfortunately, there's a certain point where it just became too hard to kill the Titans.
Yeah, the Tartarus Titans are playing just, hey, keep away. Hey, don't touch me. And if you get too close, I'm going to return some damage, but only a little bit. And it was a death of 1,000 cuts for the Olympus Bolts in these elongated team fights around the Fire Giant, around the Gold Fury, because I think you're right to say that it really was just that healing from the Tartarus Titans, that CCM unity that Hell afforded them, that slipperiness of the Jing Wei that really just made it so difficult for the Olympus Bolts to confirm any of their kills. And even if they had gotten close enough to kill somebody, Aurora was still there with Scarab's blessing, and really not any great answers from the Olympus Bolts from that. But this game was a lot closer than I think it might be revealed in just the stats and the KDs, because that Fire Giant, a true 50-50 coin toss, and it was not the only 50-50 coin toss we saw in the match. A couple of plays from SOT in particular, where he was putting as much pressure. Wow, great replays today. I guess Billy must be back, because this is exactly the play I'm talking about, where he just walks up onto Ven and says, hey man, what if you didn't get Fire Giant? Wouldn't that be a crazy lark? And it just was. Make sure that steal doesn't come through.
Yeah.
And well, the Tartarus Titans from there had a pretty easy time closing out the match.
And it's not just that. You had mentioned the Scarab's Blessing. They execute there. This is one of those moments where if Solo or Troll is still taking a ton of damage, then Scarab's Blessing procs and he gets to continue a tear. It doesn't, but he gets all of that move speed as an Achilles who's running people down anyway. So I think you feel really good. KDAs maybe don't seem as stellar. 1-0-6 there for Paul Undying. 2-1-6, I believe, is what it said there for layers, or 2-1-5, one of the two. And, you know, again, damage numbers maybe not too massive. In fact, Barra able to put up the most damage in the game, but that just goes to show how important that 8,700 healing from Paul ends up coming through. Very a large number to have to deal, and essentially negates Haddix or Lasbra plus a little bit of Jake. Like, a lot of the damage that was being dealt by the Bolts negated simply by the overall healing done by Paul there. And it feels so hard, because Mifflin, you know, you go back to picks and bans, and they were taking care of things that I think need to be taken care of if I'm the Bolts. Like, I don't want them to get Umoja.
No
maybe I'm okay with it compared to some others. I definitely don't want them getting Zeus.
No.
I don't really want them getting Kleena. I don't know. Like, maybe Kleena's of the three, the one who performed the worst last week, but the Titans also didn't necessarily play her too often. So we'll see, I guess, how they go about this one. But it feels like they started that game with a draft that theoretically could do a lot.
Yeah, I think the Olympus Bolts could go elsewhere in limiting the Tartarus Titans, but like that style of draft, I think with that much sustain is counterable. We've seen it in the past, and it's something Neilma has gone on record saying, like, yo, Ankh might not feel so good, but like if there's a healer composition, like maybe I just like belted the Berserker up and killed them real fast. That could be one opportunity. The Bolts could dedicate a little bit more of their draft towards dive if they're worried about the Tartarus Titans dedicating as much of their own draft towards sustain again. Because it wasn't just Hell. Like, Shiva healing was out there, too. And that is incredibly hard to deal with. It was a very slippery style of composition. So if the Bolts can just limit at least one of those picks and open up the door towards something that is a little bit easier to exploit, that team fight of the Tartarus Titans was not even remotely unbeatable. Like, there were multiple team fights where the Bolts were just one or two auto attacks away from securing a kill, one or two auto attacks away from opening the door to look at the Fire Giant themselves, one misplaced stun from SOT, from stealing a Fire Giant, and the game could be going the completely opposite direction. So, although the Tartarus Titans have phenomenal KDs and their stats look great, that game was a lot closer than I think the stats would indicate.
I will say, though, God-wise, a lot of their stats look real good across the board for them.
Yes.
And it's one of those things, I was looking at it because, like, you know, like one of the top banned gods up against the Titans is Erlong. That taken off the board kind of does the Bolts a favor here, right, is trying to control that, gives them maybe some wiggle room in their bans. But, you know, the Zeus has 5 out of 6 wins for him. The Emoja's like a 4 out of 4. They've got a 100% win rate for it. Same thing for the Bolts. Like that Nox that gets banned away has a 100% win rate for them. So you're getting some of the very high priority picks stripped away.
Interesting.
And it's just, what can you do to balance things out? And so far, things start off pretty similar. Same 3 bans from both teams. And the first pick Shiva one more time. First pick for the Bolts, Artio one more time. The thing that catches your eye, Bera's locked in the Jingwei. Congratulations to Bera, by the way. 100th Jingwei game right here. I've been sitting on that for literally months, man. And so this is going to be Bera's 100th Jingwei game.
Yeah, somebody got to get in there and let him know. That is not the face of a man who knows that he just locked in his 100th Jingwei game. This is something that I had briefly alluded to, where the Bolts could limit some of the safety of the Titans draft. Jingwei, a very safe pick, but if the Tartarus Titans so choose, and they very well could, that they want to play a much slower pace like we saw in Game 1, there are plenty of safe hunters still available. Potentially the safest hunter in the game, Heimdall, still out there. Another very safe pick, Hachiman. So I'm not sure if Jingwei specifically is where you needed to look to limit the draft. If anything, I think the Bolts could have potentially gone towards like a Medusa and tried to put pressure on a Jingwei before she was at that point in the game where she is nigh unkillable with a CC immune ult and the ability to just fly back in a lane whenever you want. Instead, though, they decided to take it for themselves. But the Jingwei is simply a bridge. The Jingwei is simply a piece that you can say, all right, I'm going to leave her alone in the long lane, and you're going to do everything you need. You're going to clear waves. You're not going to lose your tower. You're not necessarily going to win the lane, but you certainly won't lose it. So what do you build around that Jingwei to make that a worthwhile pick? You either want to get a lot of aggression elsewhere on the map, like a mid 3v3 that's incredibly strong, or a very early game mid-jungle combo, or something that can sit in the solo lane and dominate there, and make use of the fact that you don't need to allocate your resources towards the dual lane. As of now, with Nemesis locked in, I'm not sure that the Bolts have got that for themselves. They still could pick up something aggressive in mid, or they could try and facilitate this Artio and solo a whole lot, but I don't know. I don't know what this Jingwei is trying to build up for her team just yet.
Yeah, I genuinely only know that it's Bera's 100th Jingwei, right? Thumbs up to that.
It's a good pick. It's not bad.
Well, and like it's something that he plays well, and like you said, it does what it wants to pretty well. Here's the question I have for you, and I'm going to shift away from the Bolts for a second so they can give us a pick to maybe latch on to see what they're putting alongside that Jingwei. It was a Khepri alongside the Achilles Shiva last time for the Titans. They opt for the hell over this, knowing that one of them's going to get banned, right? Like, no matter what you take in those two slots, you're going to lose out on something from your last draft. Do you like them favoring the hell over the Khepri?
I am just such a massive Khepri fan. I think that he is a much more consistent pick, but if we were to talk about which of those two picks was more integral to the previous Titans draft, I would argue that Hell did more and was more so that Arcstone for this team. They were really playing around that healing, around these long team fights. So they were really playing around that sustain, and it synergizes very well with the additional sustain that you're going to gain from Shiva. If you were to ask me blanket statement, hey, do you like Hell or Khepri more often? I'm going to say Khepri, but for what the Tartarus Titans are trying to accomplish, I think Hell makes more sense.
Well, right now, we were wondering what was going to go alongside that Jingwei. Thoth is what was locked in there. I see a couple of hovers that are happening over on the one side. I'm not sure how much I'm going to give either of them credit until it's locked in. There it is, the Ares. Which, you know, Mifflin, when you think about Jingwei and you think about Nemesis, man, when you think about Thoth, and honestly, if you think a little bit about Artio, those chains are going to be very helpful throughout this game.
They will be. It's whether or not he's able to connect those chains on a high priority target. So it could just be that Artio dashes in and can get locked down for an incredibly long time, buy chains. If you're able to use Blink or something to close gap onto the back line, Nemesis will generally like dash in once, slice and dice, dash out. Well, you're not getting that dash out if you get connected by a chain. If Thoth wants to evade and punish, very well could be forced to use beads more often than not. No CC immunity from the ultimate means that all of a sudden No Escape has got a lot more viability in the team fight. And even Jingwei, one of the safest gods in the game, doesn't get to use one of her safety tools if she's been chained up. So I think not only is it good into this Tartarus Titans draft, this Ares pick for them, but it's also one of Aurora's most storied picks. This guy's been playing Ares for a very long time. It synergizes well with the sustain style of draft. Something people don't talk about enough on Ares. It's the conversation on Ares is, oh, God of War, you flames, 8% HP, chains, so much damage at level 3, and that scales really hard. My man just gives you 50 protections both ways, physical and magical, from bolster defenses with a healer composition and Achilles in a late game team fight who will likely be armored up, plus healing from Hell, plus healing from Shiva, plus healing from Cupid. This is a, and I hesitate to use the word, this is a cringe comp. This is cringe, dude.
And you know, I'm gonna give it the credit. It's maybe not as impressive as like playing game 100 on a god, but 44th Ares game for a
That's
rule.
a lot.
I mean, it's a lot in competitive, especially considering the splash around he has. So it's gonna be fun to watch how that works. Cupid, you had seemed a little more interested in when it got locked in, and maybe like not confused but surprised.
Yeah, I just think when I think of Cupid in the SPL, I go to like season 7 and I'm like, okay, wow, he plays Cupid. And now
Yeah.
I could say, wow, he still plays Cupid. And those are like the only times I'm thinking about Cupid in an SPL format. But looking at the composition that the Bolts have got, Fields of Love is just a really good disruption tool. We've already talked about like what the cripple from Chains is able to do, but if Ares doesn't have to do it all on his own, and if Cupid can use it for self-peel, that's going to be very versatile for the Tartarus Titans. And Cupid does have an interesting kind of matchup knowledge in that, sure, Fields of Love can be invalidated by a singular relic, Heavenly Sprint. You pop Heavenly Sprint, even if you're at like this dead center of it, if you're quick enough, you're going to get out of the center of Fields of Love. But it does force, if you want to address Fields of Love, it could force one relic selection. It forces you to pick up that Heavenly Sprint, which could limit the Bolts going forward. So I'm interested to see how this Cupid comes into play, whether or not the Bolts decide they need to address that ultimate or if they're concerned about some other picks on the field. But if I had to guess, the Tartarus Titans are like, yo, let's get an ADC that heals. Like, and Cupid heals.
And Cupid heals. And you know
Cupid
what?
Heals.
They've got, once again, a lot of sources of healing. Maybe not the res that was treating them so well last time around, but this time they're still going to have a lot of that healing. We'll see, will the Bolts bounce back, or is this Ares Cupid lock-in enough for the Titans to end up taking this 2-0? Let's find out in game number 2.
Well, I said this one could either be a Titans 2-0 or a Bolts 2-1. Let's see how smart I am this week. The Titans could take it 2-0 right now, or the Bolts could push us to 3, and then all bets are off in game number 3, Trelly, as the drafts end up forming here, and the Titans stick with something that worked for them, Paul on the Hell, also adding a little bit of healing with the Cupid, and then Aurora on the Ares. Similarities on the right side of the map and in mid, but a new dual lane look for the Tartarus Titans.
Yeah, and a new dual lane look for the Bolts. I'm loving this Jameer pick here, man. Every single character on the Tartarus Titans gets messed up by this wall. I mean, if Awesome Jake could wall off, I mean, essentially the whole squad at this point. And Jameer, one of the most annoying counters to Ares and lane specifically. You can just freeze out the flames, and then you pretty much just wall them off. You can shut up a lot of that damage. So I'm interested to see this dual lane specifically. I'm sure Barracuda not very happy with how last game went. Pretty much spent most of the game underneath the tower. A little bit more pressure drafted, but Aurora on this Ares is a very storied pick. I mean, there's been a lot of pressure. Aurora can obviously hit the chains on these priority targets, so it can get very annoying. You really just have to watch out and make sure that you're not stepping too far up when the chains are available. Paul might take some damage here.
And Paul doesn't have beads. Paul goes sprint out of base because he's worried about the slow from Lasbra. The root from Ven is all that the Bolts need there. Paul didn't bring beads out of base, was assuming that the slow would be more of a threat. And unfortunately, that was not the case for Paul. The Olympus Bolts, they capitalize and they get first blood.
I really love this Nemesis into Hell matchup as well. I like what they touched on the desk, where maybe the Hell was bringing more than the Khepri was. But what we saw last game, the Bolts were finding aggression. They were diving in very hard, and then Scarab's Blessing, they just had to back off. This time around, shut down the healing. Now you have this Nemesis into Hell matchup where you pretty much just pop the shield on her ability. She can't really break it. There's no sort of CC that Hell provides. And then at that point, you just have to run away, and Nemesis is usually going to be faster with that ultimate. So I see why Paul wanted the sprint and was trying to sprint away from the Nemesis ult and slow and things like that. But early game, I mean, Thought just has a lot of damage and a lot of lockdown with the root. You don't have your cleanse yet at level 2, so easy first blood for them.
And a lot of range in Ven's back pocket there. Great start for the Olympus Bolts. Great start for Lasbra, who's now got first blood. Laz does go beads early on this Nemesis, so Blink, not the option there, where Layers does have Blink. Laz did a good job, I think, of setting a decent pace at the start of game number 1, Trelly. Really put dual lane pressure out there and tried to make some stuff happen over on the right side of the map as well. Just there's that one overextension from the Bolts that really gave Cyclone Spin just a massive lead. And so a good look for the Bolts. That Lasbra already finds a kill here and has set some pace over in the mid lane. I'm curious how this dual lane, though, starts to look, because Barracuda, of course, has the ability to play safe, get back to lane quickly if you get taken low. Has the beads to get out of the Ares pull. You think we're still in an area, Trilly, where the potential for these 2v2s is somewhat low, despite the want of Ares to walk forward and engage, the want of Ymir to maybe find some initiation. Do you think that it's going to take some jungle presence to get action going on the left side?
I definitely think so. The Titans are smart. I mean, Aurora and Cyclone, they've been along since I've been even hearing of SMITE, right? They've been around for a while. They know how much pressure Ymir brings into this matchup. They don't want to step up, get walled off into a freeze, especially because Aurora doesn't have any beads or blink or anything. He just has the shell, so he's going to have to sit there and pretty much eat the full brunt of that damage. Jingwei's not doing too much as Barracuda tries to steal away that Harpy. So you pretty much just have to put all your stock in, you know, where is Jake right now? Can he wall us off? Right. If Lasper shows up, of course they're going to fight. If Lair shows up, of course they're going to fight. But right now, I don't think the Titans are going to be posting up too much unless they have like a level 5 power spike before. But given how much the farm the Bolts have, probably just going to sit about that mid lane and not try to push up too far.
Yeah, Ymir for Jake, just so helpful, as you've already mentioned there in that lane. Level 5 about to be there for both of the duo laners for both teams. And so I wonder, maybe small opening. I mean, Jake doesn't have beads either, but does have his ultimate. So maybe Layers or Laz decides that the left side of the map suddenly looking a little bit better. As Paul has gotten out of the initial levels 1 through 5 with only the 1 death, Ven has not been able to go back and finish up that Divine Ruin yet, so healing maximized for the time being. Couple chains out of Aurora. As Aurora hits level 5, Jake's still level 4. So Aurora just gonna walk up here. Yes, Cyclone Spin as well. Jake does reach level 5. Double airstrike, double freeze. It's all going the way of the Olympus Bolts, and Cyclone Spin used mobility to initiate in the Olympus Bolts. They'll dash in. I'm not sure they needed Laz there, but Laz was there. And another kill is in, this time is the dual lane of the Bolts getting a small lead early.
I mean, that minion dying and ticking over to level 5
huge.
Gotta be the MVP there. As Layers tries to clean up some of these backhands. Ven can answer back with some poke. But yeah, that was a level 4. Barra has to beat, and Jake is definitely getting pulled back in, turned into, oh, now we're 5? We can just turn this on you. Of course, Lazarus going to help out, but I think you're right. Cyclone Spin saw a kill opportunity with that ultimate, and it just didn't work out. I mean, that minion died perfect timing to make sure that those ultimates were out, and now that dual lane's going to be a little bit harder. I mentioned that they had to stay back a little bit. Now they really have to stay back, especially because Barracuda got the last hit. He's going to finish up the Deb Gauntlets and probably a tier 1 item after that.
You'd think Barracuda has enough gold, 2,000 in hand, to get his build well underway here. We'll absorb up one more wave, and the Jingwei passive help him get back to lane a little bit quicker. Divine Ruin there for the Olympus Bolts mid laner. Venenu built Divine Ruin first in game number 1. Saw some benefits from that throughout the game, but ended up falling just a bit short. Lasper, remember, prioritized Brawler's Beat Stick is the first item on Gilgamesh in game 1. Feels like the Jotuns is a better option here, at least to start off. Maybe a Brawler still somewhere in that build. Maybe should be a Brawler somewhere in that build. But Jotuns maybe gets the ball rolling a little bit quicker.
Yeah, those cooldowns are going to help out a lot, and right now you already have a fair bit of anti-heal with the Divine Ruin. I think Hell's Heal isn't that impactful just yet. You get a little bit of sustain, but raw damage at level 8 for Venenu is going to do a ton at this point. And the flat pen from Thoth is just going to help out as well. So I think Lasper smart to just prioritize the cooldown here. The anti-heal, I'm sure he will pick it up later, and as we saw from last game, they are going to prioritize it a fair bit. Awesome Jake, though, is sitting here and will wall off Layers. Not going to go for a stun, though. Just going to let him sort of sweep out, and now they're going to fight over these mid camps.
Layers has just been fine to farm up at the start of this game. Watch out, an airstrike from Barracuda. Could be brutal here. That's a scary rotation over from the Jingwei, but actually smart timing from Barra, because what are you missing? Nothing right now. He had already cleared a wave. And the wave's just now crashing. Should be able to make it back to left in time to collect the entire wave that's making its way over there. And so the potential of what Barracuda could have gotten done was pretty high there, but ends up falling a bit short as the Titans force out Barra's ultimate. And so slightly more susceptible as Barra, but still has bead, still has a Jingwei. And so I think Barra will end up being just fine. You start to wonder how comfortable the Bolts are feeling, because despite that initial kill, Devourer's Gauntlet stacks slightly faster here for Cyclone Spin. Likely a tiny, tiny bit of gold ahead is Barra. Not at all the case, Trilly, is what we saw in game 1 for the Titans, where Cyclone was so far and away ahead of Barra that any type of fighting over here on left just felt like it was going to be in favor of the Titans. Still pretty early to be thinking about Gold Fury, but things like that, I don't know if the Bolt's comfortable enough just yet with their lead, with the status of this game, to fully pull out that objective, despite about a 1,500 gold lead.
Yeah, we do see that obelisk tick over for the bolts. I saw Jake literally just stand between the red buff and the purple buff and just watch Aurora. And he was like, you're not coming over here. The last camp that we need, Lasber's about to get for us, so you're not stealing this offering. We want to make sure that we get this interceptor for us. Giving it to Aurora, that's just going to buff his damage numbers already. Ares is doing a ton with the Chains and Flames combo. If you add the interceptor, the shock, it's going to hurt a lot more. So making sure they get that XP and gold and not the extra damage buff, it's going to go a long way here. The bolts, as you mentioned, have a solid little gold lead here. But I just like that Jake was ready to defend that. I mean, we saw Aurora go for the invade last time where he almost died. This time around, though, Aurora probably not too afraid, going to be stepping up. So Jake is having the presence of mind to defend that objective. I mean, most people don't think about it as an objective, but it really is. You can get a lot of buffs from it, as well as the fact that it does give you a little bit of a reward when you get it. So now Awesome Jake has that extra power spike. Could look to get active in this mid lane. Still has the sprint available, but mostly used to try to get out of that Fields of Love.
Absolutely, it's strong. And Jake is able to collect it. Looks like Ven goes flat pen and then in to the tier 2 Ob Shard. 1v1 over on left. Fields of Love down onto Barracuda, but an airstrike out. We'll end up closing that one up. So no solo kills just yet, but both hunters just fine with taking their trade. As Barracuda does stick with the crit second item. Wind Demon is what his option was in game 1. As Freeze onto layers, pull, no good, as Awesome Jake has channeled his ultimate. So some tense moments here, Trelly. Damage from Ven onto layers, forces that dash away. Lots of ultimates flying right now, but no killing happening. Everyone is able to get out just fine.
Yeah, Paul was able to zoom through, just juking out that wall from Awesome Jake. That could have been a kill opportunity because, again, no beads available. He did opt for that sprint. You'd have to be a well-timed cleanse to make sure you get out of that freeze there. But Paul is just going to zoom away, so the wall goes down. And now it looks like there's going to invade some back camps over on right. SOT makes the rotation over, trying to help out. But look at SOT's tower. Haddox has had a load of pressure in this lane because he went for that teleport star, whereas SOT once again opting for the beads, recognizes a lot of lockdown on this RDO pick. I really don't want to deal with that. And another thing, he went for the Blackthorn Hammer, right? Usually, if you go for that magical defense against an RDO, you still have to worry about Lasbury. You still have to worry about this physical damage dealer that's going to come in and you have no protections for. HP, though, is going to be a nice way to survive both of that. You're going to deal with the magical and the physical just in your own little way. You have some HP set, so SOT sitting pretty in this lane at least now, but the tower not looking too good.
Right, Sa felt so strong with the Achilles in game number 1 by the end of that game. Using Scarab's Blessing just for the movement speed to get him in, get him a little bit more active is what the Titans had in mind. And the Haddox, I think, did look strong on the RDO, but just the way that game was going, it was always going to be difficult for anyone on the Bolts to find much of an impact. A couple of the big second items start to roll through. It is completed Wind Demon for Barracuda. Ob Shard finish for Ven, and so a decent-sized power spike against the tanks of the Tartarus Titans for Venenu, as he is diversified a bit. Some percent pen, 20% percent pen, plus the additional percent pen on the ability cast, as well as flat pen on the Divine Ruin. So Ven at level 12 here, Trelly, is in a spot where he can really swing out some damage.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, yeah, it's more damage against the tanks, but it's also just more damage against Paul, who is essentially a tank right now because of that Genji's guard. He's building, I think Ven just learned from last game, like, Paul is going to build tanky. He does not want to eat this damage from Thought, so I'm going to have to get percentage pen second item. Of course I want to do damage to Aurora and SOT, but Paul just has a boatload of protections already, especially if like a Lotus Crown would come through or something like that. So Ven just smart to itemize into that percentage pen early, but look at this. Pyromancer started up, completed already. When the Titans hear this, they might try to get active on the opposite side of the map, and that's exactly what Layers is going to do.
Layers looking towards purple buff. Ob Shard actually makes some sense. I'll hold the math that I'm about to do as the wall goes up. Freeze out, and Awesome Jake confirms a purple buff. So 20% pen, if we're ignoring the passive, 20% pen on Ob Shard, and it was 70 magical prots on the Genji's Guard in general. And that's ignoring any
base protections.
Base protections, right. So you're getting 40, or what, I guess 14 penetration is the way that works. I don't know exactly how the math all breaks down, but it's effectively what you're getting with some of those flat pen items anyway up against Paul. And so I think that's a strong and a smart buy there from Ven, realizing that Paul is going to go into that item anyway. Brawler's Beat Stick in for Laz. That's a lot of damage onto Aurora. Lasper's here. Yeah, it's got to be a kill, and it's Awesome Jake with the detonate who capitalizes. Tartarus Titans being run out of their left side of the map. Barracuda happy to take this trade, but an airstrike out and away has left Jake alone up, but the wall is miraculous. And Awesome Jake now being run at, but the legs not long enough from Layers, who channels the ultimate. And Awesome Jake on a dime turns around, heads on out. Paul in on a chase though. Lasbra now could be the one left alone. Paul hits everything he needs to. And the Titans at least able to pull back one.
Yeah, Paul perfectly waited out that shield there. I mean, I had to highlight the Ymir pick because, again, every single member of the Titans gets kind of screwed over by this wall. If you're trying to chase, if you're trying to use your abilities, the wall is going to get you out. Jake is able to get out, but Paul hits every bit of damage and waits out the shield and is able to get away there. Ven, though, could find a route here onto Paul as Haddix is also on the chase.
There's a route. Haddix close by. Ven low on mana. We saw some fights in game one where Ven just didn't have enough mana to scrap in the back line. Wall goes up from Awesome Jake. Lasbra now spawns. Back from base he goes. Aurora spawning just a little bit faster. Haddix, fatal strike is through. And SOT, with the well-timed rotation out, adds another kill for the Tartarus Titans.
But they have all this healing now, and this is where the fight from the Titans is going to be won. They have so much to stay in the fight after the fact is what you have to look at. It's basically just a steal option, but they're not going to go for the steal. They want to fight this.
Whoa, that's a nice freeze on SOT. Barracuda trading out some damage. Sot looking worse for wear. Healing pots down from Cyclone Spin as the rest of the Titans disengage from the Fury Pit. And even with a slight lead, still feels like the Titans are the ones asking the questions right now, and the Bolts, luckily in that instance, had some answers. But still tense moments. It doesn't quite feel, Trelly, like a 2,000 gold lead, as the Titans with their healing have been able to exert at least a little bit of pressure over the Bolts.
Yeah, whenever you take an early engagement against a healer comp, you have to get in and get out. Fortunately, that time around, Paul was able to chase down Lasbra, make sure that you got in and you got your pick onto Aurora, but we're not going to let you escape that freely. Now, everyone's full HP, so they are able to go for that Gold Fury, but the one thing about these healing comps around these objective fights is you have the healing, but do you have the actual fight potential? Do you have the confirm? Not when Final Judgment's on the table. So Ven, just showing face there was enough to make sure the Tartarus Titans, despite having the one-man advantage in that fight, they're not going to go for that Gold Fury just yet. There's just too much options. I mean, even that Fire Giant in Game 1, where Ven had the opportunity to steal away, it was confirmed by like an auto attack. So I don't think 50-50ing that right now is going to be their option, as Jake just walls off Paul's damage onto these mid camps.
Yep, and look, I always give Jake a hard time because I know he can take it. I know he's a very good player. I so often say when you see this Ymir pick, it's equally likely, as my thought may end up biting Jake here. It's a double freeze, and the cleanse out. Final Judgment flies in, but doesn't do much to Paul. Now Ven could be chained back, but uses the beads. Lasbra chasing down the backline. Fields of Love slows down the Nemesis, and Lasbra now running for the hills. One chain is out onto Lasbra. He'll make his way beneath the Tier 1 tower. As another good rotation from the Titans nets a kill this time. It's on to Awesome Jake. And I was about to finish my thought, is that it's equally likely sometimes when Jake plays this Ymir pick that he starts the game off 0-3 as it is 3-0. You know, you never know what type
They're pulling fire
pick you're going to get. And all of that is secondary to this call from the Olympus Bolts, as a few members of the Tartarus Titans are on the Gold Fury. SOT is going to walk into everyone on the Olympus Bolts, but his stun is huge, and Fatal Strike gets him out. Sot somehow survives the ambush of the Olympus Bolts, and the Titans will get the Gold Fury anyway, and the Bolts come up empty-handed.
I mean, I love the call there, right? Because they recognize there's probably no vision on this right now. They all are going to commit to the Gold Fury. Let's just go for it. Unfortunately, you just don't have that much burn onto the Gold Fury. This is not a double ADC comp with a Fafnir. You don't have a crazy amount of shred like with a Merlin or something like that, or an Anubis for that example. Right now, Barracuda has chin size and a little bit of crit, but not that much penetration for the Fire Giant. So they just weren't able to burn that one down effectively, especially because people are going to show face. SOT had the beats and the ult available, was able to get out on that one. So unfortunate that doesn't go their way. The Titans are able to get this gold lead a little bit back in their favor. Still, the Bolts are going to be leading a little bit in that gold department, but I'm sure the Titans are happy to get that gold for an answer back. But right now, the XP lead, Lasbra is not able to get to Paul. I mean, we've seen the ultimates on Paul. He tries to run down as best he can. Level 13 to level 16, it's very hard to deal with this healer right now.
Yeah, think about Fields of Love beneath a Nemesis. I mean, that just feels bad, and that's what Cyclone Spin did just a moment ago. Drop Fields of Love when Laz was trying to chase down Paul, and Paul is speedy enough to get out of that and has Sprint. And so having Sprint and not Beads bit Paul earlier on in this game, literally level 1, hasn't punished him since. Now Paul has got beads, so no Aegis. But getting to Paul is still the answer, or still the problem. So regardless of whether or not Paul has Aegis, there just hasn't been enough damage connecting onto this hell. Venenu in a good spot though. Now you finished Obsidian Shard, as I've already mentioned, but Soul Reaver as well. And so now some of the health will deal some extra health-based damage for Venenu. Fully diversified as far as damage goes early in this game. The first 3 items, one of the strongest places you can be. So some well-placed damage from Venenu will keep him on top of the damage charts. It's a good wall from Awesome Jake. Good double freeze. You gotta finish off one of these kills, and Aurora eats the final judgment. And the Olympus Bolts capitalize on a pick. As there's still a Pyromancer around the corner. Good route onto SOT. Forces an awkward moment as Paul sustains him up, but back to the Pyro go the Bolts.
That's just a beautiful wall by Jake, making sure
Amazing.
to lock them down. And then, of course, Lasper has the ult to shred the protection, so not able to survive there. But it looks like they're looking for more here. Layers could get caught out, but Jake's taking a lot of damage here.
Wall out. Freeze around the corner. Sprint considered. Not needed for the time being when you've got the ultimate out of Layers. Hello, Barracuda. As Paul down to red HP. I wonder if that's a moment where the Bolts are going to consider the tier 1 tower. Every so often you'll see the Bolts make a call to turn back to the Fire Giant, but if Aurora's back and respawning, tier 1 tower, the easier objective. Then doing some good chunk damage, just climbed up about 2,000 damage in that last engagement. Barracuda has also shot up the damage charts as well. The Jingwei starting to hit a little bit more effectively. And so the Bolts, really for the first time in the last, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, Trelly, I think, have asked the questions of the Titans. They get a pick onto Aurora, and they force an awkward moment for this Titans team.
Yeah, I was going to wonder if they were going to do the same thing they did last time, where you get the pick onto Aurora, and that's all well and good, but he's only level 13, so the respawn is so short. Do the Bullets stick around too long, where they're able to get chased down by the healing from hell, where Paul can speed them up and they chase? This time around, no. They do not make that mistake. Last time they lost Lasbra, and were able to almost lose the objective just because of that fact. They stayed way too long, so a good answer back. They decided, you know what, we're going to get the pick, and this time we need to back up. We don't want to stay this long. The sustain is there. I mean, Paul's going to heal you guys up. We need to leave. They were able to do that, and now they're not going to lose that objective this time around. The Oni Fury, about a minute out of this time, and Fire Giant still a little bit off the table. Barracuda, though, finishes that Silver Branch bow. Haddox is finishing the Bulwark of Hope, so getting a lot tankier and a lot more damage on the side of the Olympus Bolts. They already had this gold lead. What are they going to do with it?
Erendite completed for Lasper as well. And so I look at the shielding that he'll start to get towards the back end of some of his initiations. Will be strong in keeping him alive, but again, finishing off the kills, vitally important. Ven would love to go back prior to this Gold Fury spawning in 45 seconds. Ven has 2.5k gold. That's a decent power spike for this Thoth. So should have enough time to head back and regroup around the rest of his team. What if the Bolts start to fish for a pick here? You know, in the next 30 seconds, this is prime time for finding a pick and just making the next Fury so much easier for yourself and your team. Go fishing a little bit further forward, and if you look at the ward coverage that the Bolts have, Trelly, deep on the left side of the jungle, all covering up the red and the purple buff entrances, whereas the Titans don't quite have the same ward coverage on the other side, only the purple buff being covered, and then I believe a ward right on the Fury itself. Bolts should be in a spot where if a member of the Titans overextends, the Bolts can capitalize.
Yeah, and it looks like they aren't going to show any face at this Oni Fury. Layers and Paul are going to come in late, but I imagine it's already going to be done. They have a lot of damage built, and that is going to be the case. And yeah, the wall off is going to make sure that Cyclone Spin can't make it in either. So the Oni Fury goes down. I was going to say, I mean, the Titans don't really have the answer back that the Bolts try to go for, where, hey, if you show face at Oni Fury, we're going to go for the Fire Giant. It would just take a little bit too long for them to burn that down, especially where Cyclone was positioned. He was at, like, purple buff at the time, so they had no real answer back there. They're going to let that one go by the wayside. Now they have to deal with Oni minions, but the only good thing about Oni minions is when you're trying to find a push during that, right? I mean, if the Titans just sort of clear them off, no problem, and the Bolts don't go for anything, you'd rather have a Gold Fury in that slot. But if the Bolts are grouping up on Fire Giant saying, hey, someone has to be in left to defend, someone has to be in mid to defend, and now we can use our numbers advantage, that's a little different. But looking at where Barracuda is now, I can't imagine they go for a Fire Giant call.
Right, yeah, you wouldn't think so. This is such a unique game between these two teams. If I'm thinking Bolts or Titans, I'm thinking a lot of fighting happening. We are 22 minutes in with 7 kills. Game number 1, very, very similar to the pacing of this game as well. Felt like in game one, though, the lead that Cyclone had built, regardless of a onslaught of kills or not, the Titans were still the ones in the stronger spot in game one. Now the Bolts, I think, inarguably stronger on the map right now. 3,500 gold in the lead. Experience equalized really across the map outside of a 1-level lead in both solo and jungle. Mid feeling similar. Charon's coin ended up being fully bought for Venenu. Percent pen being the name of the game a little bit later on into the builds. That's where the Titans have to be careful, because the Olympus bolts are far enough forward, or something like this could happen. Is there enough damage on SOT? Look at the healing that comes out. Saves SOT's life for a moment. Could have been a lot worse for the Achilles. And he's right back to full HP.
Take a look at Barra's upgrade, though. Did not go for that Ornate Arrow. Did not want the extra crit chance. He goes for Diamond Arrow this time, just the extra basic attack damage. That's going to be a little bit different. Usually we see that on the magical ADCs, you know, the Souls and the Olerons, things of that nature, but just going for the Diamond Arrow. Doesn't want that extra crit chance, especially on Jing Wei. We'll have to see if it pans out for him. I guess he's just going for raw ability damage as well as shred, and just some lucky crits if they come.
Yep.
Whereas Cyclone Spin, he just wants crit. He's got the Ornate Arrow right now, probably goes for the last item, Wind Demon, just like last game, and we'll have to see how much he actually gets from this Cupid pick. We'll have to see if that benefits. As the Bolts get that Pyromancer down. Yeah, SOT almost went for it.
I don't mind that from SOT. How much do you give up? Not much. Not when you have healing on your team. In game one, there was double Cursed Ankh prioritized. Haddox had one, Jake had the other. This time, it's only the one Ankh. Contagion still for Jake. This is when I start to look at some of those anti-heal items. You get a bit later on into the game. The healing's really going to stick for Cyclone Spin for Paul. Obviously, the Divine Ruin's been there. Cursed Ankh for Awesome Jake. Then Entangling Wings as well, Trelly. So I look at Jake, who's set up so many of the fights that have already happened. I say so many, as we have 7 kills in 24 minutes. But 3 of the 4 kills that the Bolts have had, it's been some great walls, some great stuns. Now there's going to be another instance of CC on the back end of those.
Root Sprint.
With the Root Sprint on the other side. And I think that's a strong pickup here for Awesome Jake on the Amir.
Yeah, whenever I see the Root Sprint, I think, where are these Entangled Wings going to be used? Right now, getting Paul's Cleanse down for a Relic, that's going to be massive. You have Freeze. Aurora has no way to even cleanse that himself, so he has to either get Paul's Cleanse down or ult it, I suppose. So the Root Sprint is going to be very useful for these immobile targets that don't have much to do, unless you, like...
That's a strong Relic.
Yeah, forcing down Cyclone's Dash as well. There's a lot of things you have to do. You're forced to answer it, right? Usually you see a spray and you're like, oh no, maybe we can run
faster
away.
Or whatever, right.
But now you're rooted in place, and you
almost
have
feels like an ability.
Yeah, you have to react to it at that point. So Awesome Jake essentially has 5 abilities right now. 6 if you count the Cursed Ankh, I suppose.
Right. Now, of course, you know, that's just the nature of relics. As SOT again caught out by a wall. You wonder if it's just a matter of time. Hello and goodbye, Final Judgment. That's actually a decent loss. There's some CDR, of course, for Ven, but Final Judgment, especially around this Fire Giant, so important in confirming some of the backline. And now SOT more comfortable. Fields of Love is awesome from Cyclone Spin around the right. SOT is executed, Jake. And now he's looking for Barracuda, but Lasbra has turned around some damage, does have beads, needs to use them, as Aurora had the ultimate out. Do the Titans immediately go to the FG? Looks like the answer might be yes. Still need to be careful. Important ultimates are down. Awesome Jake respawning in 20.
They're going to make sure SOT is full HP before they start this Final Judgment. About halfway off cooldown right now. It's going to be depending on how many chains are hit right here. They have the sustain to tank this up. Do they have the damage to go for the burst? of the Bolts are here as SOT goes in.
How different this game can look in the next few seconds. The Bolts have led, and the Bolts may still lead as Lasbra goes down first, but Ven immediately follows. Alone in the back line now is Layers. Hax will chase him down. Should be a fight that the RDO feels just fine in a 1v1. 2 versus 3, but it's still the Tartarus Titans left running. Barracuda wraps around the right, while Cyclone Spin finds some auto attack damage into Haddox on the front line. Double stun, ultimate's out yet again, and Lasbra has re-engaged this fight, and the Bolts will chase down the Tartarus Titans. Aurora desperately searching for a heal, but it won't be there. SOT could be the triple for Lasbra when the abilities are back, but Haddox takes it. The Bolts buy their time, and they will add 4 kills.
Barracuda on his 100th Jingwei game is absolutely ripping through the Titans right now. Has so much damage. No mana to his name. Doesn't even need it. Just the auto attacks alone.
Don't need mana to left click.
Nope, you just auto attack away at this point. I mean, the sustain is all well and good, but when you're getting shredded by this Jingwei, it does not matter. The Fire Giant will go down. I thought once that Final Judgment missed, I mean, that was going to be curtains, right? The Bolts just had no answer back, but the Titans, they get way too split up. Lasper finds a beautiful pick onto Paul when they try to do this Fire Giant. And hell, in a group with a team, she can heal up pretty well. By herself, she only really has her third ability. It's not enough. Lasper's able to pick that one off, and then the Bolts just picked them dry. I mean, they were too far spread out. They found everything they needed. Barracuda has a huge power spike here. One more item for this Jingwei, and it's going to be the Odysseus bow. So more AoE damage in this team fight. Primal Fury is up. They're going to climb back in, and they have a lot of gold they can collect here.
Should be a simple Fury over to the Olympus Bolts. I don't think this is one now with the state of the game that the Titans can really step forward to. And both of these immobile supports, Trilly, at different points in this game have been punished. Aurora's been knocked down 3 of the 8 kills that the Olympus Bolts have. And I was wondering if it was Sot that was eventually going to get bitten by the wall, the freeze, the root, and all the damage that the Bolts were putting out. It actually ends up turning around onto Awesome Jake as the Titans rally around their solo laner. But Aurora, by the end of it, gets left alone as well as the rest of the Titans, and only Cyclone Spin lives by the end of that fight. Cyclone certainly very strong at this point here in the game. A full item behind his layers, though, from Laz after what was a good fight around that Fire Giant. Now you're starting to look at siege defense from the Tartarus Titans. You've got a Hell, a Shiva, Achilles, and then, of course, Aurora on the Ares, and Cyclone Spin Fields of Love could make a difference here, Trelly, but both have such a lead. I don't know if the Titans comp suited to defend against this type of game.
Yeah, the Titans comp, as I mentioned already, does not like the Ymir wall in the jungle.
Right.
In the Phoenix room, it's just worse at that point. You have to step up if you want to defend, which means you have to put yourself essentially out of position. If Awesome Jake has the wall on point, you're completely walled off from your team. You can't go back to the well to heal. You can't cleanse the wall at this point. No one opted to go for that Phantom Shell. They got the Fortifying Shell. Aurora didn't think the wall was going to be worth it at this point, and now Awesome Jake is seeing how much it's going to pay off. In this Phoenix room, Paul is going to have to stay back very far. He does not want to get walled off here. That could be disastrous. Without your Hell, without how much healing they've had, I mean, the damage is just going to rip through.
Yeah, you thought they had a lot of gold to spend. It was comical almost, all of the item purchased coming up on the right side of the screen as the Bolts will go back, spend up the last bit of gold. Bulwark of Hope, a nice pickup for Awesome Jake. He's going to be in the forefront of these fights. He's going to get low, and that extra shielding might help him survive. Haddox's health bar just looking like one long thing right now. I mean, he is so healthy at 4180 HP. All of those individual ticks of health seemingly blending together with how tanky and how healthy this RDO is. Bulwark of Hope in there as well. Early Fields of Love from Cyclone Spin, and now that's gone at the literal beginning of the Phoenix Siege.
That was a failed attempt at baiting out the Entangled Wings is what I have to assume. Jake just walled and ate the damage. I mean, trying to get that root sprint down early so your siege is solid, but Jake just said, I don't even care at this point, and now they're going to walk into this Phoenix room.
Yeah, and think about how much easier Lazbra's job is now. As long as you can avoid a chain from Aurora, Laz with the dashes can effectively do whatever he wants when Fields of Love are gone. Left side, Phoenix melted through by the Olympus Bolts. Doesn't take much time at all. Still waiting on those Fields of Love to come back, a quarter of the way there. And if you're not putting up any defense at all for the left side Phoenix, see what happens here towards mid. I love how Ven is thinking about this. Let's just walk around with Final Judgment Charge and see what we can find. Ridiculous 4-person stun on the back of the fight. But doesn't end up in an initiation for the Tartarus Titans. Maybe one more wave is all the Bolts need to knock down this Phoenix.
Yeah, they are going to back up here, though. They're deciding to reset. They don't have FG anymore. I was going to touch on the fact that Haddox has a lot of HP. I mean, we know that from the start, but that also means his execute threshold is a lot bigger as well. So if you are going to be at the forefront of these fights, tanking that up, the Final Strike from SOT is always going to be an option. So you have to be very careful. So I just saw Lasper hit that buff for 1,000 damage with no crit. That hi-rez proc is going to be pretty solid for this Nemesis, but you always have to watch out because SOT, pretty tanky in his own right, 2-1 right now. The execute is always going to be on the forefront of your mind. You have to be watching your health bar, but the enhanced Fire Giant certainly is going to be looked at here for the Olympus Bolts. 31 minutes into this game. This could be, I mean, even if the Tartarus Titans were able to get, this could be a game changer. Even down this much, Enhanced Fire Giant is just that big of a swing. So someone is going to have to defend that left lane. Right now, it's Cyclone Spin. You don't want your ADC gone when that's coming in, and Aurora might get caught.
Oh no, Aurora was backing, and he will get the easier route home. Awesome Jake with the freeze, and what do the Olympus Bolts do now? Do we even care about the Fire Giant. Surely you care about an enhanced FG. Now you've gotten the Fatal Strike out of SOT. What's the shot caller or the Bolt's gonna call here? It looks like a double back to the enhanced Fire Giant. Aurora still dead for 40 seconds. Should be simple for the Bolts.
Yeah, all they have to do is wait just a little bit. The Fire Minions will push in left. Aurora already dead at this point, so there's no way he's going to be able to defend this one. Honestly, it looks like Lasbra and Barracuda are going to do it themselves. They can honestly just three-man zone and pass back and forth between the carries, and this enhanced Fire Giant will go down. The left lane is pushing up, so those Fire Minions are coming in.
And I don't see health bars draining over here, as Lasbra is able to cycle through that shield effectively. Slightly low is Laz, but I think he will be just fine moving forward. The Olympus Bolts have fought back in this set, now on the verge of sending us to a Game 3 to start the weekend. We have seen 2 different Bolts and 2 different Titans already in this set alone. Left side Phoenix far from respawning. Fire Minions in onto the Titan, and the Olympus Bolts will knock down the right side Phoenix. 1 Phoenix left standing. Charlie, we haven't seen the defense on the Phoenix line yet from the Titans. These have all gone down relatively quietly.
I have to imagine there's a massive power spike right now that the Bolts have that they didn't want to go for that Phoenix right away. I mean, someone said, hey, I've got a 3K pot. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish that. Looks like Sovereignty from Awesome Jake. An upgrade Aegis for Venenu. There's a few different options here that are going to help them out. But I feel like right now with the lead they have in the Enhanced Fire Giant, 2 Phoenixes down, they had the option to go for that there. But wanting to make sure they're as strong as they possibly can, because as you mentioned before, number one, the standings are very important. You want to make sure that you're cleaning off this game exceptionally well. The Oni Fury is going to be looked at, 2 Phoenixes down, but look where the Titans are. They're stepping up to this.
Wow, so the Titans haven't wanted to defend Phoenixes, but Oni Fury maybe? Maybe there's more discourse in a jungle fight than otherwise. Last person on the backline. Oh my god, Final Judgment deletes Paul before Paul can do anything. He wishes he had Aegis. Right about now, Aurora goes down for the double kill, then hunting for a third, but Barracuda will airstrike up and over. Cyclone Spin will wait for his Aegis to time out. He will die, and so will the Titans. Layers in SOT won't be able to get it done, and the Olympus Bolts send us to a Game 3.
Yeah, Layers is going to have to defend this one by himself, because Haddix is not going to let SOT get to the backline. This Titan will get absolutely melted as they go for the kill in Layers on the base, and there it is. It's going to be the end call there. They had so much damage, and as you mentioned, Paul opted for the sprint that game. I don't think it really worked out. The Final Judgment, whenever Ven was able to connect, just completely one-shots him there.
I don't know if I saw value from the sprint throughout that game. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is a threat in the slow from Nem. I mean, the chase down on the back, either you cleanse it, you sprint it, whatever it is, it's there.
Right.
But that, and you know, maybe at times it's unfair for us. We're shining a microscope on that one moment. You needed an Aegis in that one moment, and the game happened to end in that one moment. Paul couldn't get much done this game on the hill. The Olympus Bolts bounce back. 3-game set. Whether the Bolts or the Titans take it is anyone's guess. Stick around to find out. Game 3 coming up next.
2, 1.
That's right. Welcome to the SMITE Pro League Season 9, powered by Prime Gaming. I'm not going to get tired of saying that one, man. It feels so cool to be able to do so. Again, thank you to Prime Gaming for being the sponsor here. Again, if you're not a Prime member, or if you are a Prime member and maybe you don't realize what benefits you're getting, then this is what you're going to be able to get. So if you're already there and you're not using these, then come on, man. Yeah, step it up. If you aren't a Prime member, then, well, let me tell you why you should be able to get that, or why you should be looking to get that. Not only are you going to get the free delivery and, of course, the music and the movies and all of that you get with, like, a typical Amazon Prime subscription. But on top of that, you're going to get exclusive... Invincibles, actually. Like, that is such a great show, by the way. If you have Prime right now and you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Cringe.
8 episodes. It's fantastic. But on all of that, you're going to get exclusive content, free games, as well as a free monthly Twitch sub and seasonal discounts, as well as other, surprise perks that are going to pop up just, whenever they decide to throw them out there. Things that are really fun that I always enjoy, not only is it the games, but also sometimes you'll see rewards. Watching your favorite games are going to be able to give you things, and you'll be able to get that as a Prime member, so that makes things really interesting. And again, if you have Prime, don't forget to use those. The sub button's down there, the button for all the rewards is up there, and that's going to be the 2 places that you need to be able to get there. Again, it offers so many cool benefits, so thank you again to Prime Gaming, as well as all of the subs. I know we have someone apparently in the chat named Dozen Eagle Claw who has gifted almost like 700 total subs to the channel,
Massive
like 200 or so in the last 2 days. So yeah, we love you a lot, by the way. And you know what, Mifflin? I went with this bit earlier, and I'm going to do it again because Tyler screen capped who it was. I'll have to open the chat so I can try to catch up. But I see the dankest meme dealer, Sean Iger, I want to say is how maybe it's Legier. Schwa, again, Dozen Eagle Claw, who did 50 community subs throughout all of that. Cleverly LS, Duplicate. How do you say that? Weta Peppo? How would you pronounce that one? You have the picture.
Oh, God. Where in the picture even are you?
That's the very top, Mifflin. It's actually quite literally the first thing you would see.
That's Weta Peppo, my guy. How do you I know that? He's famous.
I wanted to get you involved in this one. I know you were a big fan. I know you watched the ad and immediately just like, for no joke, the first time he saw it, Mifflin sat there for the rest of the ad telling me about how great Oblivion is.
It's a great
game.
And
how it's absolutely insane that you can just get it for free. Go
there
play
are
it. It's the
some
game of the year
Zoomers
edition.
in the chat. You guys haven't played Oblivion. I know for a fact you haven't. Here's the thing about when it first came out. We used to benchmark our computers on whether or not you could run Oblivion on the highest settings. I had to beg my father for $5 so I could buy the Horse Armor DLC, and you guys get it for free from Twitch Prime or Amazon Prime or whatever Primes. Get in there. Go download that. It's like probably 5 megs because games used to be small.
I think I missed Danimal when I was reading through this list. So
Yeah.
Danimal's there. I'm going to re-shout out Schwa because I saw
Did you
Schwa
get
go, yo,
Zelborg?
that's me, Schwa. So, which one? Yeah,
Zelborg.
that was earlier. Because the last one I read during the first time we did this bit was Ionizer. And so I just remembered where we were. We also just got the Venicide in chat as well. So shout-outs to them and shout-outs to the Bolts for giving us a 3-game set. I almost forgot why we were here. I was having a lot of fun just hanging out.
Let's talk about Oblivion some more.
The Bolts...
Or the Bolts.
If you're going to do that, put us on the second monitor, please. Either way, I kind of meme it coming into this. It's Bera's 100th Jingwei game. It goes really well for him. Goes well for the Bolts all around. I mean, Mifflin, everything it felt like they were able to do was just pushing the Titans back a little bit. And fights like this, I mean, you get pretty far back. There's not a whole ton of kills, but they started things off. They were the ones who were finding a little bit more control. And it was around this fight that they finally got a good grip on the game. And they're already up 5K gold.
Yeah, I'd argue the Tartarus Titans had won this engagement if anybody dies that isn't Paul. You could trade out 2 members, and it just can't be Paul. But because Paul is the one to die, the Olympus Bolts are able to surge forward. Lasbra able to pick up a ton of kills. The damage output, not super high. Cyclone Spin going to be the highest DPS on your team, and the only guy he's allowed to hit in every single team fight is a full tank RDO piloted by Haddix. I don't really care how far into your build you are as a hunter. You're probably not dealing enough damage to deal with an RDO on your own. And I think that weakness of the Tartarus Titans draft being that they couldn't confirm any kills either. I think their entire strategy was, all right, we're going to take the fight as long as possible. Eventually, someone's going to get low enough that we can get an execute, and then we win the team fight. But it never really happened. After that point, after that team fight at the 26 or so minute mark, Lazarus comes up massive for his team, and the Olympus Bolts were able to separate these team fights consistently. Jake gets great walls to make sure that healing was a little bit harder to come by for the Tartarus Titans. Even Barracuda getting involved on this Jingwei, a pick that I would not associate with aggressive tendencies, dashing in consistently, putting in a ton of damage, goes undying in this match. Ven's play, if you want to remember, all the way back to the 1 minute mark where he dashes in and gets a kill onto Paul to slow down the Tartarus Titans early game because Paul went Heavenly Sprint at rank 1. Probably worried about the slows, probably should have been worried about that evade and punish. Just great plays from the Bolts all together to slow down this Titans draft and make sure that they couldn't use their early game pieces to make a smooth bridge to the mid to late game.
I don't know if this counts as like collusion or something, but I might ask Barra to like not play Jingwei anymore because like it looks so pretty here, Mifflin. Like on the screen I have where it just says Barracuda, Jingwei, 100, 57% win rate.
So it's 57 wins.
No, 57. Yeah, I guess that is 57 wins. Huh? I didn't even think about that. And then 3.7 KDA on that pick. So he's been rocking it pretty well. And he's been doing it more than anybody else has played any other god. That's the one that always blows my mind. He is the most played player god combo that we have in Smite. So really fun to watch, and it just is, I guess cathartic, maybe that's the word for it, to see it look so pretty on this screen. They win that game though, Mifflin. And Dave, if I remember what he said at the beginning of game number 2 there, maybe it was also at the end of maybe it was during the predictions thing earlier. He said it a lot. Was either a Titans 2-0 or a Bolts 2-1. And how do you think, if you're the Titans here, how do you adapt to that to try and either A, make that not happen, or if you're the Bolts, how do you make sure that you keep going on that path?
The Bolts, I think, can just go towards that exact same style of draft. I think it is going to work up against healer comps or non-healer comps. That composition, very adaptable. The only thing that I think might see some shift-ups is the Ymir pick for Awesome Jake. That feels like a little bit more so a counter selection or something just to deal with that hell. The Tartarus Titans, on the other hand, I'm pretty happy that a healer comp shows weakness. I was really worried
that it was just going to stomp.
I was really worried that in the nerf pass there would be a big emphasis shift in the SPL towards tank and healer compositions because of a loss of damage overall in Smite. But the Olympus Bolts show that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. I think the Titans could do one of two things. They can either try and go back towards that exact same style of compositions and try and force a situation where they can pick up Capri for themselves, or they can completely adapt and maybe go back towards some more standard lock-ins. But the Olympus Bolts, and specifically Barracuda, won't allow you to have your moment in the sunshine.
I guess I'm going to have to see what 101 looks like on this screen. Literally no one else has hit 3 digits, so this is the first time that we'll get to see it. Mifflin, first I'm going to go through Cephas Soul 1369, shout-outs for the prime sub. Retrograde 42, as well as Johnny Quasar 19. That's a cool name. So not only all of them, but I also have to ask you.
Please.
Ardeo, Shiva, Gilgamesh, all of insert any other god, Thoth, all of these other gods that we've been seeing in the top 6. Is Jingwei the one? Is Jingwei really the one to take first pick here?
Look,
I mean, she did.
She did.
But is that like morally right?
Is this a morally objectionable stance that the Olympus Bolts have taken on the Jingwei issue? Look, Jingwei is a very plug-and-play pick. I don't think that she is a god that you need to build a composition around necessarily, outside of the fact that you are probably going to try and build a composition around the fact that you don't need to play around her. You can look elsewhere. But she's very safe. She's not really gotten too bad of a matchup in any of these lanes. I can't think of any counter picks specifically that makes it difficult to be a Jingwei. We know Barracuda is very tenured on this pick. More picks on Jingwei than anyone else has got on anything in competitive history. Whether or not she's a first pick potential god, I'm not sure. I'm not a pro, and it's a new patch.
Yeah, and you know what? This is where we learn, right?
That's
and I guess if she shows up in game 2 of this set,
and did a lot of damage.
And then, I guess she showed up game 1, game 2, she absolutely pops off. Game 3, she becomes first pick.
100% win rate, 9.4.
We'll figure it out right here, right now. I guess whether or not it's going to end up working. Turborilla ends up prime sub in there, Mifflin, while we're going through this one. Locked in alongside that. So Artio, Shiva, we kind of been there. Although you get both of them now on one squad plus a Hebo. And now Habwa, Mifflin, has jungle potential. But there's already a Shiva there. There's already an Artio there. So it feels like something that Paul could play. And Mifflin, we know Paul's real good at this pick.
For those of you who have been Paul fans for the longest time, will realize that he has a dual pedigree. This was a dual player that broke out into the competitive Smite conquest scene. Beforehand, was dominating the 1v1 scene, made a big name for himself in the 3v3 competitive scene, and then has since transitioned to conquest. But in his time in 1v1s, in his times in duels and jousts, he built a name for himself on 2 picks specifically, maybe 3. I remember a lot of mumbling, a lot of murmurs through the grapevine about the Paul Uhl, the Pooler. I remember a lot of the Paul Hell. Heard a lot about that.
Yeah.
And the Peebo as well. And
yeah.
it's pretty good, okay? I've got a lot of faith in that. But there is some flex potential here. Could be Habwa in the jungle. Could have Shiva flex over towards support. We haven't seen it too often, but we have seen it enough that I think it is worth bringing up. And then Artio over in the soul lane. So we'll get a better look at the rest of this draft as it rounds out. But worth noting again that Habwa's got an interesting matchup in a Jingwei, and that the combo is generally water cannon, water spout, crushing wave, water cannon.
Before us,
well, water spout is mitigatable by Jingwei. Knockups, she can dash out of them. Makes it a little bit harder to confirm that combo.
Yeah.
So I am curious to see how that one pans out. Ganesh locked in. Yeah, that's Hebo mid.
So I guess instead of the 3-1, you want to hit her with the 1-3 so you can get all your damage out there. But then you have to get real close.
You want a 1-3-1 ult, generally.
1-3. I guess, yeah, because your one's on a nuts low cooldown.
Super small.
Love
Tiny.
it overall. And so we'll see, I guess, how that works out for him. Look, I love watching Paul on this god. It has always been a treat. And for a long time, if it ever shifts into the meta, it becomes something that is almost a must ban up against them. And so we'll see whether or not it continues about that route. Ymir locked in. Not too much of a surprise. ESET locked in. Maybe not a surprise when the bolts lock it in, except with a Ymir on the board, that's not going to Jake this time.
Yeah, that has got to be ESET mid for Ven.
Watch Vin load into this and play Ymir mid just to ruin us.
Yeah, I'd hate that, truly. I think the Bolts just lose if that's the case. But ESET mid up against this composition from the Tartarus Titans will need to play very safe throughout the early portions of the game. Shiva in the jungle will have a hard time locking down ESET. All that knock-up immunity in Wing Gust means that you're going to be largely mitigated in your efficacy throughout the early portions of the game. But this Ymir pick, I think, very interesting for the Olympus Bolts in that the Tartarus Titans composition, barring Ganesh, has no answer to a Ymir wall. Literally none. Phantom Shell, I suppose. You got to buy that, though.
And even then, Ganesh's is like, hey, man, if
it's
you,
I'm out.
I can escape. And even then, you're like, okay, I just used my,
your initiation,
engage to get away. So maybe it's going to save some things in the jungle, but is it going to be worthwhile? A lot of similar Pantheon pickups here for the Titans, though. The Rom locked in at the very end to hang out with Ganesh and Shiva. So this is where things get, I think, a little more interesting for you. Jingwei and Rom is not a matchup that we've seen a lot this year. I don't think it was a matchup we saw a lot last year, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's not one that's uncommon, I guess, if you go a lot further through the history of Smite. How does it feel? I mean, getting that lock in, we always talk about his ult, but lane phase can be weird, especially with a Ganesh next to you. How's Jingwei Ymir going to match up against Rom Ganesh?
Well, I would argue pressure probably does go over to the Tartarus Titans. Rom able to auto-attack the entire wave with piercing autos, also has some aggressive tendencies in that Jingwei is generally telegraphed, and when she wants to use that the dash, drops the little tornado at her feet, gets knocked up, then dashes out. Cripple arrow from Rom on the dash means that you can probably cancel that out pretty consistently, but I'm not expecting a whole lot of waves in the laning phase itself. Maybe some kill pressure.
That's going to happen in mid.
Maybe some kill pressure for the first 3 or so levels, but after that, generally going to slow down. Man, Trelly is loving
That's
that
what
joke.
that's
dude.
what I loved
hate
the
it here,
most was
bro.
I said that nobody else can hear it because the mic's cut, but I just hear Trelly go nice over my shoulder.
That is crazy, dude.
And you trying to keep going. Oh, that was perfect timing for everything. Well, earlier again, I highlighted it, and I'm sure he's going to say it this time around when we end up throwing over there. But David said 2-0 for the Titans or 2-1 for the Bolts. I'm going to ask you, is this the kind of draft that gets the Bolts a win, or are the Titans going to give them too much trouble?
I might be a Bolts truther here.
You're a Bolts
let me
truther
throw
here?
in with the Bolts.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in game number 3 between the Titans and the Bolts as we go down one more time to Trelly and Dave.
I've been doomed. I said the Bolts were going to win this, and now Miff agrees with me, so there's no shot. No chance I'm able to win this one. The Bolts go all 3 against the Titans, and one final game separates us from finding a winner here in our first set of the week. Trelly, what an exciting way to start off this weekend in the SPL, huh? You get Bolts on the Titans, and I was nervous after game 1 that it wasn't going to live up to the potential for these two teams. Kind of a slow burn game. One fight for the Titans wins it. I thought the Bolts might mentally check out after that, and we might be headed towards a 2-0. But the fight back showed us there's still a lot to fight over here in this game, and the drafts keep on giving here. And how about this mid lane matchup? Not one I expected to see today or next week or anytime in the future. An E-set up against the Hobwa for Paul.
Yeah, not something I definitely would have expected, but it's an interesting match nonetheless. And as far as I'm concerned, Cyclone Spin and Barracuda have a gentleman's agreement. They're not going to pick any of these meta hunters. They're not going to pick the Medusas or the Cernados, and they are not going to build Crusher or Death Toll. And they're going to keep going with the Gilded Arrow and the Dev Gauntlets because that's what they want to do right now, and they're both following each other up. So I respect that. The Jingwei and the Rama going to be an interesting one. Again, not really one of these lanes that probably wants to brawl too hard. Cyclone Spin, though, could go for some nice plays off the airstrike, trying to snipe away Barracuda if he gets away with low HP. So that could be interesting as this game goes on. But Awesome Jake gets to run back the Ymir into a comp that does not appreciate Ymir once again. I mean, they touched on it on the desk, but last game the Titans did not care to get that Phantom Shell. This time around, though, we'll see if Aurora upgrades that one into the Phantom Shell instead of that Fortifying Shell, because it would have helped out a few times last game for sure.
Yep, absolutely. And I do look towards Paul and his relic choice again. So it's Blink on the Hebo. Now remember, a sprint for Hell, and that didn't really pay off for Paul down the stretch. So now it's going to be Beads or Aegis, you assume, for Paul in that second relic slot. I mean, you love Blink. I mean, the ability to blink forward, Crushing Wave, go through your rotation, that's going to help Paul. And his ability to initiate. Yeah, Haddix will take all of that just fine. Does leave Paul potentially susceptible, though. I don't know. You know, Hebo's such an interesting spot where, of course, the CC immunity from Crushing Wave helps out. But then when you're in the fight and you're kind of in the back line, if you don't kill your target, you're there, and you want an Aegis, but then their CC, you want the B. It's such a unique spot to be in where it feels like there's 3 relics that you really want on Hebo. And I'm intrigued to see what direction Paul ends up taking this one. But somehow that's the least interesting pick over in mid with E-set here for Ben. Something we've seen plenty over in support. Blue buff confirmed by Haddix and Lasbra. Haven't seen like full damage E-set in a minute here, Trelly. What are expectations for Ben?
I prefer the E-set in mid. I mean, I've been saying it time and time again. I see it lose so much in support. Of course, we see it win as well, and I understand why the pros value this pick so much, but when E-set's doing damage, when she's able to build actual damage items for the Circle of Protection, it's just so much more annoying, I feel. But again, I understand the value in just going full tank. Paul, though, might have to blink this blink, and he will. He's going to get out of there just fine. That's sort of the benefit of going blink, where you're able to just blink the blink if Lasper wants to get a little bit, you know, try to find that pressure in the mid lane. But I just think that the damage gets a little bit better, and you get more value out of the pick in mid. But I understand the value of just going full tank and trying to be a CC bot. That's also helpful. But then here, I think it's going to have a decent matchup in Nepal, able to immune the knockup with Wing Gust, and hopefully survive the one-shot drop a Circle Protection after the fact, and then maybe you can try to brawl there. But if Paul just waits and sits around until he can one-shot, Ben's probably not going to even want to duke it out there.
And this game is going to, I imagine, Shirley, for you talk about Crushing Wave and Circle of Protection, it's going to be an objective-secure nightmare. I mean, both teams have an opportunity to steal and secure the objectives with Circle of Protection, with Crushing Wave. Both mid laners, high potential to make some plays happen. Level 5 on both mid laners, level 5 on Aurora, but not there for Awesome Jake. Lasbra sends his ultimate layers way as the Dharmic Pillars were down. Looks like this one will fizzle out with Dharmic Pillars and the Shiva ultimate being used. Dash away from Aurora as well. A slight experience lead for Cyclone Spin over in the dual lane as Barracuda just now reaches level 5. Lane pressure going towards Cyclone, so again a slight gold lead over to Cyclone Spin and the Tartarus Titans as well. About 500 or so in the first 4 minutes. Aurora would love to steal this away, and he will do so.
They had their backs
Takes it
turned.
and backs off. Small little differences have built up a small little gold lead here for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, the dual lane already had pressure. Obviously, Aurora dropped those Dharmic Pillars, and Jake was still level 4 as Cyclone Spin dashes in, and Barra was still level 4. So they had the level 5 first. Now they're going to get the buff advantage, too. So that's going to be a bit annoying for Barracuda. We'll be able to just go back, finish up the full Dev Gauntlets, actually. So he didn't opt to go. I mean, he's going to be stacking that a lot earlier than Cyclone Spin, and he gets the lane a little bit faster, but didn't opt to go for that. So that's going to be an interesting way to build. As long as you have the stacks online, I think Cyclone's going to be just fine. But it's a little bit down in the XP department, as we mentioned. It's going to be interesting where Jake opts to put his pressure, because he has sort of foregone a little bit of farm, trying to let Barra catch up. Is he going to sit around in this dual lane like he is right now and possibly look to wall off Cyclone Spin? We'll have to see. Cyclone might not know he's here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Olympus Bolts are at least able to snag some of their right side of the jungle. Yeah, the network chart's pretty interesting right now. Everyone on the Bolts, 1 to 300 gold behind their counterparts, and that is a 2,000 nearly experience lead as well for the Titans. And literally nothing has happened. This is just good old-fashioned pressure from the Titans that have built up. Little gold, little experience at the start of this game. Paul's got a lead, Layer's got a lead, SOT's got a lead. Everyone has a 1-level lead. I could list everyone. Nearly did. Stop myself, but everyone's got a 1-level lead on the Tartarus Titans right now. And so, you know, that is not game-breaking by any means, but just shows you the way of the ebbs and flows of the early game. I do wonder how the team fights start to look once the solo laners are a part of them, because of course we know how tanky RDO can get traily and how team fight changing and RDO can be. But Cthulhu may be in a class of its own when it comes to descent into madness and making plays happen in team fights. And is there going to be an answer? It feels like a lot of that. As Dharmic Pillars get used, that's going to be a pullback in onto Awesome Jake, and the final snipe is there. The Titans have found first blood, and Awesome Jake just gets jumped on. Dharmic Pillars plus snipes from Cyclone Spin equals a lot of damage into a Ymir.
Oh yeah, those are some great snipes from range, so Cyclone is able to clean that one up. Layers, though, looking for this red buff. Paul has Blink, remember, so there could be some engage here from the Hebo. The Crushing Wave with Spear of the Magus is going to do a lot of damage, so Ven has to respect that and just back off. The red is going to go the way of the Tartarus Titans, so they are pushing this lead that they have. About 1,000, maybe 1.5 at the moment, and they're trying to climb a little bit more, close to 2 at this point, so they are farming very well. Just 1 kill at the moment, but the XP, as you mentioned, is already in their favor. I will think, though, as you touched on the Cthulhu HP, Cyclone Spin, the way he's been itemizing this game, this whole set, going for the chin size pretty much immediately. That's going to be the second item in that slot, so shredding out that HP. Paul looks like he's building into a Soul Gem, could possibly get the Soul Reaver as well, so they will have some answers for the large HP pool, but that Haddix will be building into. So it's going to be interesting late game. I mean, usually we see this Cthulhu, we see like the Witchblade, and we're just like, who is ever going to kill this Cthulhu? Right now, though, looks like they have some things to deal with it.
They do. Time is on the side of Paul later on into this game. The carries at the threat of being one-shot, but a Jingwei safe enough to play a little bit more defensively. Ven will be a little bit further back as well. That, to your point, Trelly, is where the Blink comes in handy. Awesome Jake. That's a falling for the first death of this game, and this is where, if you're Jake, you know, at times we've seen him try to do too much, make-up plays that haven't ended up working out. And so I do like kind of being a bit more reserved. Now, you don't want to let this game completely slip away from you, as it's now a 2,000 gold lead for the Titans in the last 3 or so minutes. It just continues to build up. Can't just continuously let this game slip away from you, as Barracuda is now 2 levels behind Cyclone Spin. Purple buff invade yet again. Last time it was Dharmic Pillars up. Okay, use this time. It's a good wall from Awesome Jake. Purple buff. Barracuda needs it. Barracuda needs all of this and is able to grab it. Now falls just 1 level behind Cyclone Spin, but I think the mindset's smart here from the Titans, Trelly. I mean, we've got a lead over on left and basically everywhere else. Let's just keep putting pressure on these buffs.
Yeah, it looks like Haddix made the rotation over to try and help the squad out as Ven finds SOT trying to invade that speed buff. The timer was a little off, but the dash has been used, and SOT, he's not going to be able to get out of this. The
Blink
slow's going to come
forward.
in. They have a lot of damage.
And the blink in from Laz, and the slow, and the ultimate. Gotta be a kill here onto SOT. Haddix zones out the RDO, and Lazbra answers back, and the Titans, in the meantime, able to walk over to the Gold Fury and grab that one for themselves. The dual lane of the Bolts was in range, but unable to steal it away as the Tartarus Titans had the burn and had all the damage in the world. And that'll keep the gold lead right where it's at, and actually a little bit worse. 3,000 with one objective for the Titans.
Yeah, I understand trying to find an answer back, but if you are going to put that much pressure into the right side of the map, the left side becomes susceptible. Unfortunate, not able to steal that one away. I mean, they had too many tools. I think Turn of Fate from Aurora was able to confirm just about 330, but Paul used Crushing Wave as well, so there really was nothing that was on the left side of the map that could really outdamage either of those abilities there, unless Jake had like a fully charged ultimate, which 2v4, it's not going to happen at that point. So the Titans are able to climb this lead a little bit more, but at least you get someone on the board. Lazbra 1-0 right now, building into that hi-rez Lament, which works out very well for the Nemesis kit. You have the auto attack cancel on the shield, which you can do a lot of damage with. So trying to maybe burst down Hebo right now could be an objective because no second relics just yet. Paul, only level 11. You're going to have to deal with the beads or an Aegis pretty soon, and right now, that's your only time to kill him for free.
Yeah, that window closing, though. Paul has played around his safety so well so far in the mid lane. Probably go back here in a minute, pick up one of those two relics. Then Voidstone out of mid, got one for Haddix as well. A Paul-esque style build, not full on defense, but a bit of a hybrid item for Ven in the second item slot. So rotation, wouldn't you guess it, a purple buff spawns. The Tartarus Titans send their jungler over towards left. Jake and Lazbra here to answer as well. Barracuda equals up levels. Nice wall from Awesome Jake. Forces the dash out of layers. Who's teleporting in? There's only one that gets channeled. Actually ends up getting cleared. And so no one ends up teleporting through. And SOTs is the one on cooldown. He's over on right. Doesn't matter. No one made their way to left. Haddix attempting to. But the Olympus Bolts will defend their purple buff. Give Barracuda a little bit more farm. Stops that from being invaded yet again. Heads up play by the Bolts.
Yeah, if Haddix did make it over there, that could have had some chase opportunity with the Descent into Madness. A blink Descent into Madness especially would be able to close that gap. But the ward gets killed, so Haddix will have to just sit back in lane and deal with the RDO. And I understand Haddix wanting to get away from this. It's an annoying lane to deal with. So much CC, so much healing. Like, can I just go fight over there with you guys? And it looks like Paul is going to juke out the wall here and use the blink. Now he's going to look for some damage.
Has damage. This time, teleport channel. This time, Haddix should make it. As Haddix is now on the left side of this fight, he'll dash forward, Descent into Madness. Not yet. Crushing Wave out from Paul. Cyclone Spin rolls away. Lazbra blinks forward, has the slow, has the auto cancels. Cyclone Spin is going to crash back down to earth here, but Lazbra stuck around for too long. Cyclone Spin gets taken down by Venenu. Another good wall on the left side of the fight from Awesome Jake. Sets up another, and the Olympus Bolts collapse in the left side of the jungle. Layers and Cyclone Spin both go down. And the initiation, the engage, the chase down, it was all Bolts.
Yeah, there is no neutral objective on this side of the map except for the Obelisk, so Awesome Jake is going to try to steal that away. Make sure the Interceptor goes down for the Olympus Bolts here, and it will. So it looks like they will get a little bit of a damage buff, some gold, some XP, things of that nature. But Haddix, huge rotation over here. Beats SOT out because the teleport was not available. They get the kill, but unfortunate, that Gold Fury's already gone. Pyromancer still available on the right side of the map, and it does get pinged away, but you can't make the rotation after the fact, and now probably just might have to look to defend because it looks like the Titans are going to pull this here. SOT is going to tank it up.
Yeah, it's not one that the Bolts are going to have the legs to go in and defend. Not the fastest burn, but fast enough that keeps the Bolts out of contest range. Pyromancer to the Tartarus Titans. Lazarus looked great now this game. 1-0-2 so far on the Nemesis, playing around Venenu so well and Haddix. All three members of the Bolts at 1-0-2. Affecting all three of the kills that the Bolts have in general. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about layers on Shiva jungle because we have seen some great moments out of it. We've seen early game impact, but just, you know, hasn't been active early in a lot of these games. You know, has hovered around the purple buff to help out with some invades. Feels like Lazbra's been able to do just a little bit more here. And you look at net worth. I mean, near bottom of the charts. Now, it's only a couple 100 gold ahead as Lasbra, but Layers has had a tough time, I think, finding his impact here in this game.
Yeah, it seems like Layers has really changed up his playstyle from last season where he was going for these like hard carry assassins in the jungle where you can just get ahead, get big kill counts, flashy plays, things like that, to sort of this support style jungle where Shiva is going to be able to heal up the team, create some decent peel, that sort of thing. And it changed because, I mean, I drafted Layers on my fantasy team, and I thought he was going to be pulling out these Kamazatas, these things like that. But right now, he's sort of just saying, hey, I'm going to heal up Paul. I'm going to heal up Cyclone Spin. I'm going to make sure they're able to success. And right now, yeah, not too much, but he's been able to get active, and that poke is going to go a long way.
Poke damage, I suppose? Because that's surprising to me, admittedly, that, you know, and again, it's nothing against Layers specifically, just the way that this game has gone. Surprised to see the Shiva at the top of the damage charts, but maybe the poke, some of the pull-in, that extra fire damage, even though they haven't resulted in kills. You know, pressure from Layers maybe has been there. So it could be a bit off base, but I think purely in the kill column, Lasbra has just done more than Layers so far here this game. Primal Fury is going to be up here shortly, Trelly, and the gold gap is completely closed. Remember, was 3,000 for the Titans, now dead even, going into a very important fight over here on the left side of the map. Both Hunters, again, opting for very different style builds. Cyclone Spin looking for Shred, Barracuda looking for Crit. And so you wonder how the relative strength of these two teams look on what could be an important Primal Fury fight.
Yeah, this time around the builds make complete sense. I mean, they always made sense. I mean, these guys know how to build and they know how to get as much damage, but this time around makes sense. Jingwei wants that crit, wants the kin size as well, just to be able to shred as much damage as possible. And Cyclone Spin, he looks across the map and sees a Cthulhu. So that's going to be the immediate kin size into the Silver Branch Bow. You want as much cooldown, I mean, as much auto attack speed as possible, and just shred down that HP. It makes sense to me. And now we're seeing the Tartarus Titans. They recognize that this Gold Fury is up, this Primal Fury specifically, and they're trying to show some face around here. Vision will be the name of the game, and right now the Oracles are down, so no one wanting to pull this one just yet. They recognize right now that SOT's on the right side of the map, but look where Haddix is. He's heading up to this Gold Fury.
Fully completed Obshard for Venenu now, who's on his way out of base. And an awkward spot for Paul, where Paul is still plenty strong, but only has the tier 2 Obshard. And so would love, if he has enough gold, to go back and finish that up. 900 gold or so. But looks like he might just have to hover over here on the left side of the map. Haven't seen the brawl between Circle of Protection and Dharmic Pillars and Crushing Wave and the snipes from Cyclone Spin. The ability to steal and secure the objective in this game. Maybe some of the highest we've seen between compositions built here as of late. As 3 members of the Bolts do hover around the Primal Fury, they will pull it. Make it 4, make it 5 as Ven is on his way over from mid. Wall from Awesome Jake, seemingly well timed. Circle Protection is down, snipes from Cyclone Spin, not enough. And Circle of Protection wins the fight this time, but now you don't have it for the actual fight. If there is an actual fight, and there isn't, and the Olympus Bolt's able to rotate in, quickly secure the Fury, and for the first time this game, a somewhat decent-sized gold lead to the Bolts at right about 800.
Yeah, Paul was sticking around for way too long, didn't even have the mana to want to go for that fight, so has to back up the second that respawn is channeled. They just realize, hey, the recall is channeled. They realize, hey, there's no Crushing Wave here. If we get out-confirmed by Cyclone Snipes, we're just bad, so let's just pull this Gold Fury. And of course, Circle of Protection doing about 650 damage. It's going to be enough, but look at Lasbra here. Going to take the 1v1 versus Cyclone. Barracuda's here as well. They're going to dive this.
Because Cyclone doesn't have ult. Cyclone has both actives.
He doesn't have life either.
My goodness, that happened quickly. Cyclone Spin simply jumped on. Blink, ult, and a whole lot of damage from Barracuda and Lasbra. Didn't give Cyclone Spin the opportunity. And a heads-up play from the Bolts jungler, who has been active so far this year, and the Bolts have looked better for it. Obelisk can get drained out here. Teleport being channeled by SOT. And the Bolts back away. And so SOT used the TP, heads on over, nothing to be had.
Yeah, good bait there. They're like, hey, we're going to go for this tier 2 tower. We totally are. See, we're about to auto-attack at SOT. Teleport's like, all right, we'll just back off now. And Haddix gets to push the wave in right. Pyromancer is available if they want to show some face there, but it looks like the Tartarus Titans recognize they're going to go for the Greater Scorpion over here, and they're just in case. They can listen right now. If they hear abilities on the Pyromancer, they're going to know it's up despite having no sort of vision over here. Awesome Jake, though, leading the charge, and I think they might go for the pull as well.
Yeah, why not? The Bolts were able to secure the last objective. Circle Protection still there. Bracer goes down. I wonder how okay the Titans are with the state of the game here at this point, because again, you know, the scaling of Cyclone Spin is going to be there. Paul is going to one-shot carries later in the game. Pyromancer effectively being one-shot here by the Bolts. And so do you think there are alarm bells ringing now for the Titans who had a massive lead, now fall behind about 2,000? So again, not massive at this point in the game, but still pretty strong for the Olympus Bolts. What level of emergency are we at now for the Titans?
I mean, I'm looking at Paul's build, and right now, hold that thought, it looks like there will be a Dharmic Pillars drop as Layers gets chunked out.
It does, but ends up dashing away beneath the Tier 1 tower. Looks like Aurora's going to drop the Dharmic Pillars just for disengage. Lasbra able to rotate left and free farm the left side.
Yeah, I was going to say, Paul's build right now does not deal with Cthulhu. Obviously, Haddix would be able to pretty much solo him if you found him in the jungle. Look at this. 3 Tartarus Titans are chasing left, and 3 Bolts are looking at SOT. The team is so split right now.
Yeah, who's going to get out? Lasbra is not. That's a crushing wave straight to the dome. And Lasbra ends up falling for the first time this game, but so does SOT for the second time this game. Also a Tier 1 tower in mid. Net win for the Olympus Bolts in that regard as a little extra gold finds their way there. Layers, I think, heads up play here to farm away some of that jungle. Wall up nearly there. But the dash is good from Layers. Are we chasing this? Dash is down.
No blink.
But 4 members of the Bolts collapsing in. Sprint gets used by Awesome Jake. Wall is up. And now Layers is going to turn his damage there. Cyclone Spin low. He's squishy as well. Has the snipes, has the Aegis, has the beads, has everything. Will use the relics, but won't survive. Now Layers caught out on the other side of this engagement. The wall from Jake is good. Yet again, no point in sending out the freeze because Ven has got damage, and Ven's got 4 kills in game 3.
And look at this, they're all backing at the same time. They're gonna run right to Fire Giant. They're not gonna take any time on this. You have the 5v3 matchup right now. You have plenty of damage to do this. The only thing on the map right now that you have to worry about, he's riding a surfboard right now. Paul has the ability to try to steal this one away because Circle of Protection was just used. As long as the zone duty is good, which I've already mentioned, Haddix right now can do insane amount of damage to that Hebo. Here we go, Paul. The whole game's in your hands right now.
Yeah, this is where this game can be over or right back towards even. Freeze onto Sot. Ult, knockups, damage. It's all there, and it's all Bolts. Venenu on a rampage, just full bot of Soul Reaver. Heads back to map and lets SOT realize how much strength this ESET's now got. Fire Giant melting away. And Paul is just going to get zoned. The Olympus Bolts close to closing this game out. We are 21 minutes in, and the gold lead is huge. And it's going to get worse. 5,000 at the moment. 3 Tier 2 towers left on the map.
Yeah, the CC chain, the amount of lockdown, the amount of damage. I mean, I can harp on it for a while. They have so much shred. They have burst damage. The Olympus Bolts, their draft has really come together here. And especially no one from the Titans want to push up because, again, Awesome Jake has been having these walls. We saw it just then against Layers, where Layers was not able to get out because of a perfectly placed wall. Aurora still has not upgraded that shell, so if the Phantom Shell will come through, it's not going to be up until this point where there's a 6k gold lead, so won't be able to get the benefit of that. And now Lasbra is just stealing away as much farm as possible. The Oni Fury has spawned in here, so there could be a Fury opportunity for the Bolts to just push these minions and sort of split up the map even more. Right now, though, they've got the lead where they could just go for this Tier 2 towers, make it about a 10k gold lead at that point, and then how are you going to fend against that? Paul, again, the whole game seems to be on can you hit a massive crushing wave, because besides that, there's not many surprises to be had. RDO, very one-dimensional in her engage. Cyclone Spin could go for some nice snipes and has that shred potential, but the crushing wave, the 1-0 Hebo right now, is your best opportunity back into this game.
Ven has just looked so lights out as well. The ESET, not the easiest mid laner to play around, not the easiest mid laner to hit all of the damage on, but the silences, the stuns, the spirit balls, it's all been there for Ven so far this game. And at 5-0-2 is willing his team forward. Now, Barracuda's played a big role as well. This Jingwei has again looked good, and it needed to look good. The Olympus Bolts first pick Jingwei in the Game 3 draft here, and it ends up paying off, at least in the first 23 minutes. So barring a massive fight from the Tartarus Titans, the draft is worked for the Olympus Bolts. And now you've got 2 full minutes of Fire Giant buff, 2 full minutes of a massive gold lead, and Oni minion waves pushing in. I think you can see the Bolts get active right away with these minion waves.
Does seem like it. They might go for the 4-1 split here, leaving Lasbro alone in the mid lane to push with Oni waves as 4 get active on that left side. But Paul trying to get that Magi's Blessing will not. And now Lasbro's just going to go left. There's 2 in mid right now.
Whoa, Haddix, he's found the back line, and Haddix is up into the Descent into Madness. Circle of Protection's down, burst heal, and Haddix is effectively taking no damage. But all of this fighting just for the left side Phoenix. The Olympus Bolts, they make use of the Oni minions. Grab the most important Phoenix on the map. So they might go back, maybe considering a reset here. You don't have Laz's ultimate, no circle protection, no Descent into Madness. Maybe feeling a little bit worse about a fight.
Yeah, they used pretty much everything there, making sure that they did not, number 1, lose anyone. They didn't want to lose that Fire Giant above them. Number 2, they wanted to make sure that Fire Giant did go down. But look at this, the Titans are grouped as 4, and Awesome Jake may have stepped a little bit too far up.
Awesome Jake has only been caught out once this game. Nearly made it a second time, and that would have been an impactful second. Would have completely ended the last bit of this Fire Giant buff. There's the rollout from Cyclone Spin. Again, beads, Aegis, and ult. We're all ready to go. But this time, Cyclone Spin not needing to use those. Cyclone has also just gotten sad on this game. Think about the number of times that we've seen the Bolts rotate over towards left and keep this ROM just further and further behind. Haven't seen Cyclone Spin be able to get active and feel comfortable in this lane for a little while. Now falls to 1 and 3, but same for the right. SOT has just been jumped on. Feels like the Bolts have really spearheaded where they want their pressure to fall.
As far as I'm concerned, that's because of how game 1 went. Barracuda was like, hey man, I was at this tier 2 tower all game. I got no sort of help. Cyclone was able to just dash on me wherever he wanted, so now you guys have to return the favor. This time around, Cyclone Spin is getting that same treatment. He can't post up right now. He does have that opportunity where I think Lasbro probably could have went for the kill there, but if he does get up into the ultimate, has the Aegis to stall, the whole team rotates over. At that point, you could lose the next FG if you lose 2 kills there, so smart to not try and chase that one. Cyclone Spin does have some stalling to do in his own right, but now, about 50 seconds before this Fire Giant does spawn in here, but Jake, a nice placed wall, could find a pick. Aurora did upgrade that shell, but not for Phantom Shell. He's got Fortifying Shell, so the wall will remain true. Everyone but Aurora will be stuck by that.
Awesome Jake's mindset remains the same. Aurora playing catch up here as far as items go. Still level ahead of Awesome Jake somehow. But you've mentioned earlier on that Jake happy to let some of the farm go to his team. And why not when the way this game has gone? It's been pretty effective for the Bolts. A couple Fire Minion waves will head into the base of the Titans. Still 20 seconds on Fire Giant though, so some damage is going to get whittled away from the most important objective on the map, and that is the Titan's Titan. But doesn't end up being super impactful right now. Now, if the Fire Giant was already up, this would be easy for the Bolts. You pull it, you grab it, you maybe end the game. But something that the Titans have to be wary of. You can maybe slow play this now as Fire Minions slowly working into the base of the Tartarus Titans. Don't need to force anything just yet. All 5 members of the Titans are here. If you can take a deep breath if you're the Olympus Bolts, somebody's going to have to go back. Instead, we're far enough ahead. We're feeling comfortable enough that we're going to pull the objective. Watch out, Lasbro. He's been jumped on by Paul and Layers, but what's the damage on the back end? It's huge, as half of their health bar is missing. Aurora desperately chasing down Haddix. Should be a kill for the solo laner. And before it's over, the fight is somehow disengaged by everyone. Aurora will die alone, and the Olympus Bolts double back for the FG.
Yeah, you gamble a lot on that crushing wave being able to kill Lasbro. Unfortunately,
Circle of Protect,
it's not going to be the option. Yeah, there was a lot of damage that came through just then all at one time. But
that was nuts.
Yeah, I think Paul had the right idea where we need to get a pick right now because we're so far behind. If we do take a 5v5, we're not going to win it and we're going to lose FG, and that's not going to be the option. This time around, though, they don't get the pick. They lose Aurora. Now, 5 strong of the Olympus Bolts knocking on the Phoenix door.
In go the Bolts. 15 seconds on Aurora. After a great game 1 from the Titans, the Olympus Bolts have adjusted and have a real good look at a game 3 win, at a set win to start off our week over the Titans. Cyclone Spin knocked up and knocked to the side. Lasbro has found a route into the back line, and Paul didn't have crushing wave. Cyclone Spin never had a chance. A double kill for Lasbro, and the Bolts have gotten rid of 2 of the priority targets. Barracuda adds 1 as well. And the Olympus Bolts will take this set in 3.
They had the circle protection. That's going to be enough damage, and the Titan guns go down. Just dominant playstyle from them. The Hebo mid was never able to really get online. As long as you're able to keep that in check, they couldn't get to that late game portion of the game where their carries are getting one shot. We mentioned about the potential for the Titans to do that amount of damage. We just never saw it.
I thought that the Bolts might surprise some people here today. I won't talk about my predictions anymore. I'm sure the desk will do that for me, but don't worry, I got you covered. Bolts take this one in 3. And this now continues one of the hardest seasons of the SPL to predict, because I think coming into this matchup, the Titans looked like the best team in the league with just how their recent matchups had gone. The Titans may be the team coming in with an edge. Now the Bolts beat them. Who knows what's going to happen in our later sets? I mean, this is nuts in the best way possible. The Olympus Bolts, they beat down the Titans, and they take it in 3. Charlie and I will take a break. So will everyone else, and we'll be right back to break down this game.
right, the Bolts go down in game 1, but win in 3.
You had me in the
as
first
they
half.
turn that around. A very impressive turnaround for them. And you know what, Mifflin? I've decided that the 101 does not look quite as good as the 100. But 101
Unlucky.
games for Jingwei there for Bara. And a win here for the Bolts. Mifflin, I mean, this one, you know, we're going into that where we were talking a lot about the Hebo. We were talking a lot about the potential that the Titans had. And we never really got to see it. The Bolts kind of just stopped them flat.
Yeah, that was just a great play from the Olympus Bolts. Their composition, I felt like, just handily dealt with everything the Tartarus Titans were bringing. Specifically that Ymir, man. I mean, Jake was just tossing up walls, and it felt like he could be willy-nilly with it, because no matter what, it was going to find some value against a composition that did not have a whole lot of answers. Ven's performance on this E set, equally impressive. How many times was it walk up, dispel magic, spirit ball, into freeze, into Nemesis ultimate, into a tank that used to be there, right? I mean, just somebody that you used to know, like a full-on Goatye track, man, because the Olympus Bolts really did just have a solid game plan coming into this match, and were able to execute on it very, very well. And Lazara, I think, deserves some credit, not only for his play on field, which was great, as it is every time he locks in the Nemesis, but also the itemization. I had brought up briefly that the Tartarus Titans Hubwa selection could spell issues for individual members for the Olympus Bolts, but once Lazara picked up Magi's, who is the Hubwa supposed to go on? It's not the tanks, doesn't really deal with those super well, and it's not really Barracuda, because he's just going to dash out of the knockup.
Yep.
So it's got to be Nemesis, right? Kill her before she touches the ground. Oh wait, Magi's got picked up. So now all of a sudden this Hubwa has got 0 targets, and well, the Olympus Bolts, I hesitate to say make it look easy, but it didn't seem like they were struggling too much.
They definitely ended up having it. When the fights are happening so far and few in between that a Magi's bubble is going to continue popping up in time for you to engage on them, I think it looks really, well, just good. 4-1-5 there for Lazara. 5-0-5 for Venenu. 0-1-8 for Jake, but the 1-0-10 for Haddix, being able to knock up the 10 assists without dying throughout all that. The Cthulhu, I think, creating a lot of space, creating a lot of opportunities in team fights. And we just didn't get to see that come to full fruition, I think, on the other side. Still good damage out of Paul, but not as much, I guess, as necessary to convert to a lot of kills. That's really where they were lacking on the Titans. And so staying power existed there for the Bolts. And realistically, both games they won. Like, game 2 definitely felt a little closer, right? A couple of juggles, I think, where things could have gone wrong. Things just kept going right, though.
Game 1 was close, too.
Game 1 was very close. Honestly, it came down to that Fire Giant fight.
Sure
If it hadn't been, you know, just slightly in favor of the Titans there, then it could have been a Bolts win. But the third game, that one was very heavily towards the Bolts. And we can go ahead and talk to Venenu about this one. And it's weird. I was going to, if this had been Bara, I would have asked a ton about, like, oh, well, why are you playing so many games of Jingwei? I guess I could ask you why he's playing so many. But realistically, I want to know what prompted you guys. You lock in a lot of, like, ESET support. How did you decide to make the shift up to bring it back into mid?
I mean, obviously with like meta changes and DR changes, you know, the meta can swap. I think it's fine in both. I think she is very just a situational character.
Yeah.
I think we just kind of did our homework on them and kind of knew what they were going to draft and everything like that. So we just went into it pretty confident. Unlucky stumble game 1.
Yeah.
The boys trolled me in the duel lane, but you know, we recover from those.
Well, I guess there's question number 2 was going to be what happened in game 1. I guess it feels very long. Like 25 minutes of that is kind of back and forth between you guys. Yeah. And it wasn't until, and we watched it in the highlights, like a good zone that just kind of slowed you down from being able to get like your ult off.
Yeah.
And that one fight, was that something that you guys, I guess, kind of just like, were like, oh, well, it happens. Like they got the fight, we're done.
Yeah. So game 1, we ended up dying in duo. We went for like just a duo-side play in the gank, and then we ended up dying there, which is pretty bad because it pretty much brought them back in the game. I think we were like 2.2k up or something like that. And then obviously everything else happened, and then in the FG bounce, Sod actually got a really good blink off on me.
Yeah.
I was full charged ult, and then he got his blink off and stunned me, and then I couldn't obviously charge up the ult enough, and then I think it was a Jingwei auto or whatever stole it, and I was just like, oh, well, unlucky, you know. It's a 50-50 at that point anyway, and, you know, it kind of is what it is.
At that moment, we were just like, oh, man. Oh, well, game 2, I guess.
I mean, you just got to move forward from that point and just, like, make sure all the boys are confident going in.
Well, based on what I can tell, going forward worked out pretty well for you guys.
Yeah.
Game 2, game 3, you guys end up winning. Congratulations once again, man.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one.
Always fun to watch the Bolts play Mifflin. It has been, I think, a delight. Again, sometimes we're curious as to whether we're going to get that Bolts that we just saw, or if we're going to have some where maybe there are a couple more mistakes that get made in the early game and things slip through their fans. A fun set, and they give us 3 games, a treat for what I expected. And of course, they shake up things in the standings and shake things up for what is going to be week number 4 here as you look forward. Again, today, we're going to be watching the Scarabs and the Warriors up next.
Exciting.
And we're going to get to see the Bolts and the Scarabs. So depending on how the Scarabs look today, it's going to be a very easy conversation tomorrow afternoon about how that set will shake out. But a 2-1 win here. You know, when we start talking about standings, luckily, you know, it's only one round robin phase here, so everyone's only playing each other once. It's the only time that the Bolts and the Titans are going to play until the end of the phase, things like that. Makes it a little easier when it comes down to standings and any ties that might end up coming up, because you got a lot of easy head-to-heads. Plus minuses maybe don't come into the equation as often, but 3-3, 3-2, 3-2, 4-2, 4-2, 4-2. Yeah, a lot of these teams seem to be right next to each other. And then 1-4. Although, you know, you go up, let's say a win here, maybe go to 2-4. Scarabs, if they can get a win tomorrow, all of a sudden 3-4, can bring themselves back into the equation, not completely out of it, but not the easiest route in the world either. So that is going to be maybe a stressful couple of sets for them. And Mifflin, again, top 4 is probably where you want to be the most, get to that seeding land, because that helps you more in Masters. And it helps you a lot, I think, at the beginning of Phase 2. And realistically, it makes it so like you just have to play less games, right? You don't have to do as much to get to the same prize pool as some of the SEC teams.
And playing less games is so valuable in an esport or anywhere where its strategy comes into play, not just because you get to keep your hands fresh, right? Not just because you're worried about exhausting yourself. It's more so about something the Camelot Kings love to talk about, hiding strategies.
Yep.
You do not want to have to be forced into a situation where you have to show multiple versions of your hand. Oh, sure, we have this early game composition that dominated this SEC team on day 1. Oh, well, now we can't use it up against the, I don't know, the Jade Dragons later on in the tournament, or we can't use it up against the Camelot Kings or these other top-seeded teams. So finding yourself in that top 4 spot and just removing yourself from contention of just showing your hand early is so important, especially in these longer events, which is generally something a little bit newer to SMITE. We don't really have these week-long events all the time, meaning that teams that get to just skip the first 3 days have those entire 3 days to just study up on what people are bringing.
And so that's why it's going to be even more important. The Scarabs will highlight need to win a lot of their sets to even get into the conversation of being out of the bottom 2, and that can push them from 7th and 8th week 1 of Masters into top 6, which will push them to then the second week. So we'll see whether or not they can actually hold it up. The Bolts keep things interesting for us in the standings, and the Scarabs have the chance to. We'll see how that shakes out in set number 2 right after this.